Hello everyone and welcome to Subreddit Dreams. I've been scouring the front pages and hidden gems of Reddit to bring you the most fascinating and unbelievable stories on the platform. If you love a great narrative as much as I do, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. Grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and let's get straight into the stories.
Story 1.
I trusted my neighbor for 6 years. I let his kids play in my garden. I ate his burgers every August, drank his cheap lager, and told him he was a good bloke. And the entire time, he was stealing from my family, including the medication that keeps my daughter alive. My name's Craig. I'm 43. I live in a cul-de-sac in North Leeds, one of those quiet estates where the houses all look the same and the bins go out on Tuesday. It's the kind of place where you leave your car unlocked, where parcels sit on the step for hours because nobody would ever touch them. Or so I thought. It started with something small. An Amazon parcel, a phone case for my wife, maybe 12 quid. Tracking said delivered, but it wasn't on the step when I got home. I shrugged it off. Happens, doesn't it? Driver marks it delivered early, drops it at the wrong house. I filed a claim, got a refund, forgot about it. Then it happened again. And again. Over the next few months, maybe 5 or 6 packages went missing. Some got refunded, some didn't. My wife started getting frustrated. I started blaming the delivery drivers. Royal Mail, Hermes, DPD, I was convinced they were all useless. But here's the thing that changed everything. My daughter Ellie is 11. She's type 1 diabetic. She's been on insulin since she was 4. We get her supplies delivered, insulin pens, test strips, glucose monitors, the lot. It comes through a pharmacy delivery service, usually every 2 weeks. One Thursday in March last year, the delivery didn't arrive. I called the pharmacy. They said it had been delivered at 2:15 in the afternoon and signed for... I asked them to send me the signature. They did. It wasn't mine. It wasn't my wife's. It was a scribble, barely legible, but it looked like someone had written, C. Hargreaves. That's my surname, except I was at work and my wife was picking Ellie up from school. Someone had walked up to my door, taken my daughter's insulin delivery, and signed for it using a version of my name. That's when I stopped blaming the postman. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not my wife, not my mates, nobody. I went online, bought a small wireless camera, the kind that looks like a doorbell, and mounted it above the front door angled to cover the full driveway and the path from the street. I also bought a second one, a tiny little thing, and hid it in the hedge that runs between our property and next door. The hedge belongs to both of us, me and my neighbor Darren. Darren Whitworth. 41. Football coach for the under-12s at the local club. The kind of bloke everyone likes. Always out front, washing his car, always waving, always got time for a chat. His wife Paula runs a cake stall at the school fair. Their son plays with Ellie sometimes. We've been to their barbecues every summer since we moved in. I had absolutely zero reason to suspect him. The first week nothing happened. No deliveries went missing, nothing on camera. I almost took them down. Then on day 9, I ordered a pair of trainers. Tracking said out for delivery. I watched the live feed from my phone at work. At 1:47 in the afternoon, the DPD driver walked up, left the parcel by the door, and drove off. At 1:53, 6 minutes later, I watched Darren walk through the gap in the hedge, look both ways, pick up the parcel, and walk back through the hedge into his garden. Calm as anything, like he was picking up his own post. I felt my stomach drop. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I wanted more. Over the next 3 weeks, I ordered small items, cheap stuff, things I didn't need, books, cables, a kitchen timer. I staggered the deliveries across different days and times. Darren took 4 out of 7. Always the same routine. He'd wait a few minutes. After the driver left, check the street, come through the hedge, grab it, and disappear. He never rushed. He never looked nervous. He'd clearly been doing this for a very long time. Then I found the rest of it. I started checking online marketplaces, eBay, Facebook Marketplace, Vinted. I searched for items I knew had been delivered to my address and gone missing over the past 2 years. And there they were. A Bluetooth speaker I'd ordered for my wife's birthday, sold on eBay by a seller called DW Bargains. A set of resistance bands. A kid's science kit I'd bought for Ellie's Christmas stocking. All listed, all sold, all from the same account. The profile picture was a Leeds United badge, but the postage location was our postcode. It was Darren. He wasn't just taking my stuff on impulse. He was running an operation. He was taking deliveries, checking what was inside, keeping what was valuable, and reselling the rest. The forged signatures, the timing, the hedge, he'd mapped the whole thing out. I sat in my car outside the house for 20 minutes that night, engine off, just staring at his front window. His kids were watching telly. I could see the blue light flickering. Paula walked past the window carrying a mug. And I thought, do I call the police? Do I knock on his door? Do I burn the whole thing down? Because here's what kept eating at me. He took Ellie's insulin. He signed for it. He knew what it was. The box says it right on the label, temperature-sensitive medical supply. And he took it anyway. My daughter could have gone into a crisis. She nearly did that night because we had to scramble to get emergency supplies from the hospital pharmacy at 9 o'clock at night while Ellie cried because she was scared. And the whole time it was sitting in Darren's house, or in the bin, or sold to God knows who. I chose to confront him first. I don't know why. Maybe because part of me still couldn't believe it. Maybe because I wanted to see his face. I went over on a Saturday morning. Paula was out. His kids were at football practice, ironic since he was supposed to be coaching. I knocked. He opened the door in a tracksuit, coffee in hand, and smiled. "All right, Craig, what's up?" I held up my phone and pressed play. The footage. Him walking through the hedge. Him picking up the parcel. Him looking both ways like a man who knows exactly what he's doing. His face didn't crumble the way I expected. It went blank, completely flat, like a mask had fallen off and there was nothing behind it. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He said, and I'll never forget this, he said, "How far back does the footage go?" Not "I'm sorry." Not "I can explain." He wanted to know how much I had on him. I told him everything. The camera, the eBay account, the forged signatures, the insulin. I told him I had enough to go to the police, and that what he'd done to Ellie's medication was criminal, not just theft, but something that could have endangered her life. My voice cracked when I talked about her. I didn't want it to, but it did. He leaned against the doorframe and rubbed his face. Then he tried to play the card I knew was coming. "Craig, mate, we're neighbors. We're friends. Let's sort this out between us. I'll pay you back. Every penny. Just don't involve the police. Think about my kids. Think about Paula." I looked at him and I said, "You didn't think about Ellie. I called the police that afternoon. They came, took my footage, took my statement, and arrested Darren the following Tuesday. The investigation turned up more than just my parcels. 3 other houses on the cul-de-sac had reported missing deliveries over the past 2 years. Nobody had ever connected them. Nobody had ever suspected Darren. He'd stolen from the Patels at number 4, from old Mrs. Grady at number 9, from the young couple who'd just moved in at number 12. The total value was estimated at over £4,000. He was charged with theft fraud by false representation, and because of the insulin, reckless endangerment, he pleaded guilty to the theft and fraud. The endangerment charge was dropped in a plea deal, which still makes me sick. The cul-de-sac changed after that. Not in the way you'd think. Some neighbors thanked me. Some avoided me. Mrs. Grady said she'd suspected something for months but didn't want to cause trouble. The Patels said they'd mentioned missing parcels to Darren himself, and he'd told them it was probably kids from the estate. Paula moved out within a month, took the kids to her mom's in Harrogate. The house went up for sale. The for sale sign stood there for weeks like a headstone, and the thing that still sits with me, the thing I turn over at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep, is how long it went on. 2 years. Maybe more. All because we trusted him. All because he smiled and waved and coached football and flipped burgers on a Sunday. All because in a quiet cul-de-sac in Leeds, nobody wants to be the one who points a finger. We'd rather lose 100 parcels than lose the peace. I know that now, and I know something else. The peace was never real. It was just silence. And silence is where people like Darren do their best work.
Story 2.
I trusted that man with a key to my house. Let that sink in for a second. For 12 years, Dave Marsden lived 6 feet from my driveway, separated by a low brick wall and a strip of privet hedge. He came to every barbecue. He watched my kids grow up. He helped me carry my mother-in-law's coffin. And the entire time he was stealing from me. My name's Paul. I'm 44. I live in a cul-de-sac in Round Hay, Leeds with my wife Sarah and our 2 boys, 13 and 10. I'm a plumber by trade. I run a white van, keep my tools organized, and I don't ask much from the world except to be left alone on a Sunday with the football and a cold lager. I'm not dramatic. I'm not the type to cause a scene. But what Dave Marsden did to me, what he did to my family, changed something in me that I don't think I'll ever get back. It started small. So small, I blamed myself. A cordless drill went missing from my van in late September. I'd left the back unlocked, stupid I know, and I figured I'd been careless. Bought a replacement, 40 quid from Screwfix, life moved on. Then in October, a parcel disappeared from the front step. Amazon said delivered, but nothing was there. I filed a claim, got a refund, and chalked it up to one of those things. Then another parcel. Then a full jerry can of petrol I kept by the garage for the mower. Then a set of socket wrenches. Sarah noticed it before I took it seriously. She said, "Paul, that's 5 things in 2 months. Something's not right." And she was right. I started locking everything, bringing parcels inside the second they arrived. But the feeling lingered, that creeping sense that someone was watching, waiting, timing it perfectly. So, in November, I bought a camera. Tiny little thing, motion activated, 60 quid off Amazon. I mounted it under the eave, above the garage, angled down at the driveway. Didn't tell anyone. Not Sarah, not the boys, not the neighbors. I just wanted to know. 3 days later, I had my answer. It was a Tuesday. I was on a job in Harrogate, wouldn't be back until 5. The camera pinged my phone at 11:47 a.m. I opened the app during my tea break, expecting a cat or a delivery driver. Instead, I watched Dave Marsden, my neighbor, my mate, the man I'd had round for Christmas drinks 2 weeks earlier, walk calmly up my driveway, open my unlocked van, take a pipe cutter and a bag of copper fittings, tuck them under his jacket, and walk back to his own front door. He didn't rush. He didn't look around nervously. He moved like a man who'd done this 100 times. I sat in that van in Harrogate for 20 minutes just staring at the screen. I replayed it 4 times. I felt sick. Genuinely physically sick. Not because of the pipe cutter that was 30 quid. It was the casualness. The comfort. The way he knew my schedule well enough to time it when I was 40 miles away. I didn't tell Sarah that night. I needed to think. I barely slept. I lay there running through every interaction I'd had with Dave over 12 years, re-examining every smile, every wave, every time he'd leaned over the wall and said, "All right, Paul." I started wondering how long it had been going on. Was it months, years? How much had he taken that I'd never even noticed? The next morning, I watched him leave for work. He saw me on the driveway and gave me his usual nod. "Cold one today, mate," he said. I nodded back. My hands were shaking. I went to the police first, showed them the footage. The officer was sympathetic but honest. For items under a certain value with a first-time report, they'd likely issue a community resolution. A conversation, maybe a caution. He said I could confront Dave directly or let them handle it. I chose to handle it myself. That was probably my first mistake. I knocked on his door that Friday evening. His wife Karen answered, all smiles. "Oh, hiya, Paul. Come in. Dave's just in the kitchen." I walked through their hallway, a hallway I'd walked through dozens of times, and found Dave making a cup of tea. He turned around and said, "All right, mate, want a brew?" I said, "No, I want my pipe cutter back, and my drill, and my socket set, and everything else you've taken off my driveway." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. Karen froze in the doorway behind me. Dave's face went through about 6 expressions in 2 seconds, confusion, then recognition, then fear, then something cold and hard that I'd never seen before. He put the mug down slowly and said, "I don't know what you're talking about." I showed him the video on my phone, held it right up to his face, and I watched every excuse die behind his eyes. He didn't apologize. That's what still gets me. He didn't say sorry. He said, "It's not what it looks like." Then he said, "I was going to bring it back." Then he said, "You've got loads of gear, Paul. You wouldn't even miss it." Each excuse worse than the last. Karen started crying. Not because of what he'd done, because she was embarrassed. I was there in her kitchen making a scene. I kept my voice level. I said, "Dave, I've got you on camera. Multiple times. I've already been to the police. I'm giving you one chance to return everything and we never speak again." He snapped. Just like that, the mask came off completely. He called me a grass. Said I was overreacting. Said real mates don't go to the police over a few bits and bobs. Then he said something that made my blood go cold. He said, "You think you're better than everyone on the street, don't you? With your new van and your fancy barbecue and your perfect little family?" That's when I realized it wasn't opportunism. It was resentment. 12 years of smiling at me while something toxic festered underneath. I left without raising my voice. I went home, sat Sarah down and told her everything. She cried. Not about the tools, about the betrayal. About Karen, who she'd considered a close friend. About the barbecues and the shared school runs and the Christmas cards. All of it contaminated now. Within 48 hours, the whole cul-de-sac knew. Not because I told them, because Dave told them first, spinning his own version. According to him, I'd barged into his home, threatened him in front of his wife, and was trying to destroy his reputation over a misunderstanding. He went door to door. He actually went door to door. And here's the thing about a cul-de-sac. It's a closed system. There's no neutral ground. People had to pick sides, and some of them picked his. Janet and Roger at number 7 said, "I should have handled it privately." Mike at number 3 said the camera was an invasion of privacy. An invasion of privacy. I filmed my own driveway. But then the truth started leaking out. Because Dave hadn't just been stealing from me. Linda at number 9 realized her missing garden trimmer hadn't been taken by a passing teenager. Tom at number 12 checked his own garage and found tools missing he'd written off months ago. One by one, people started comparing notes, and a pattern emerged. Dave had been helping himself to anything unsecured across the entire street, probably for years. Then Karen left him, moved back to her mother's in Wakefield. And when she left, the real story came out through a mutual friend. Dave was nearly 40,000 pounds in debt. Credit cards, loans, a gambling habit he'd hidden from everyone. He'd been selling stolen tools and equipment online to cover minimum payments. The copper fittings he took from my van, worth about 200 quid to a scrap dealer. That's what 12 years of friendship was worth. 200 quid and a Betfair account. The police eventually charged him. Theft by finding they called some of it. Straight theft for the rest. He pleaded guilty at the magistrate's court in January. Got a 12-month community order and a fine he'll never pay. He still lives next door. That's the part people can't believe when I tell this story. He still lives at number 5. I still see him every morning. He doesn't wave anymore. Doesn't speak. Just gets in his car with his head down and drives off to whatever's left of his life. The cul-de-sac never recovered. Not really. The barbecues stopped. The group chat went quiet. People are polite but guarded now, and there's a tension that hums beneath every interaction like an electrical current. Trust is like that. Once it breaks in a small community, it doesn't just break between two people. It breaks everywhere. I got my drill back, by the way. He left it on my doorstep in a Tesco bag the day after I confronted him. 40 quid. That's what started all of this. 40 quid and a man who smiled at me every morning while he picked my life apart one tool at a time. I don't leave my van unlocked anymore. I don't leave parcels on the step. And I don't trust the people who smile the widest. Not anymore.
Story 3.
I handed my sister the spare key on a Tuesday night in March, and that single act of kindness became the worst decision I've ever made in my life. She showed up at my door with 2 suitcases, mascara streaked down her face, and her kids, my niece and nephew 7 and 9, half asleep in the backseat of her minivan. Derek had finally pulled the trigger on the divorce. She said she just needed a couple weeks to figure things out. A couple weeks. I remember those words exactly because I've replayed them in my head about 10,000 times since. My name's Marcus. I'm 34. I'm an electrician. I've owned my house in Columbus, a 3-bedroom ranch in Westerville since I was 28. Paid my mortgage on time every single month. Finished the basement myself. Framed it, drywalled it, ran the electrical, put in a full bathroom. That basement was nicer than most apartments. And I gave it to my sister Danielle because that's what family does. Or at least that's what I thought family does. The first 2 weeks were fine. Danielle kept to herself mostly. The kids were polite. I'd come home from a job site, there'd be dinner on the stove sometimes, and I thought, okay, this is working. She was looking at apartments on her phone. She mentioned a place in Reynoldsburg. I didn't push. Week 3 is when things started shifting. Little things. She rearranged my living room furniture. Didn't ask. She signed up for Amazon deliveries using my address, not temporarily, but as her primary. I found mail from the school district addressed to her. I picked it up, looked at it, and my stomach dropped. She had enrolled both kids at Charrington Elementary, using my address. Without saying a single word to me about it, I confronted her that night. Tried to keep it calm. I said, Danielle, you enrolled the kids here. She didn't even flinch. She said, they need stability, Marcus. I can't keep bouncing them around. I told her I understood that, but she couldn't just use my address for school enrollment without asking me. She looked at me like I was being unreasonable. Like I was the problem. That was the first time I felt the ground shift under me. A week later, I came home from work on a Friday. I went to open the basement door, the one at the top of the stairs that leads down from my hallway, and my key didn't work. I tried it again. Nothing. I jiggled it thinking maybe the lock was sticking. Then I looked closer. She had changed the lock. On a door inside my own house. I knocked. Danielle opened it with this look on her face. Not guilty, not apologetic. Defiant. She said the kids needed privacy. She said she'd bought a better lock because the old one was flimsy. I stood there in my own hallway, locked out of my own basement, and I didn't even know what to say. I told her to change it back. She said she would. She didn't. The next Sunday, I went to my mom's house for dinner, same as every week. My brother Terrence was there, my Aunt Patricia, a few cousins. Normal Sunday. Except when I walked in, my cousin Keisha pulled me aside and said, "Congrats on the house thing with Danielle." I said, "What house thing?" Keisha looked confused. She said Danielle had told everyone that I had agreed to make her co-owner of the house. That it was a family arrangement. That we were going to split the mortgage and she was going to live there long-term with the kids. I felt my blood go cold. I walked into that kitchen and looked at Danielle sitting at the table buttering a roll like nothing was wrong, and I said, "Can I talk to you outside?" She said, "After dinner." I said, "Now." We stood on my mother's back porch, and I told her she had no right to tell people she was co-owner of my house. She said, "I didn't say co-owner, I said we had an arrangement." I said, "There is no arrangement. You're staying temporarily. You need to start looking for a place." She crossed her arms and said something I will never forget. "I'm not leaving, Marcus. The kids are settled. This is their home now, too." I went to a lawyer the following Monday. His name was Greg Hauser, and he practiced tenant-landlord law out of a small office on East Broad Street. I sat across from him and explained the situation, expecting him to say something simple like, "Just tell her to leave." Instead, he leaned back in his chair and said, "How long has she been living there?" I said, "About 6 weeks." He nodded slowly. He said, "She's established residency. Under Ohio law, she's a tenant. Even without a lease. Even without paying rent. You can't just change the locks on her or throw her stuff out. You have to formally evict her. I sat there and stared at him. My own sister. In my own house. And I needed a court order to get her out. I filed the eviction notice. Danielle was served. And that's when the real war started. She called my mother crying. She called my aunts. She called everyone. Within 48 hours, I had 7 family members blowing up my phone telling me I was heartless, I was cruel, I was punishing those kids. My mother called me and said, "Marcus, she's your sister. She has nowhere to go." I said, "Mom, she changed the locks on my basement door. She told people she owns my house." My mother said, "She's going through a divorce. You need to have compassion." Compassion. I had given her compassion. I had given her a free place to live, free utilities, free everything. And she repaid me by trying to take my house. The eviction process in Ohio is not fast. Danielle got a legal aid attorney. She contested the eviction. She claimed she had a verbal agreement with me, a verbal agreement that she could stay indefinitely. Her attorney filed motions. My attorney filed responses. The court date got pushed back. Then pushed back again. Meanwhile, I was living upstairs in my own house with my sister and her kids in the basement, and we weren't speaking. The tension was suffocating. I'd hear her TV through the floor at midnight. I'd find her kids' cereal bowls in my sink. She started using my washer and dryer at all hours. She parked her minivan behind my truck in the driveway, so I had to ask her to move it every morning before work. Every single Sunday, my mother would look at me across the dinner table with these sad, disappointed eyes. She never once looked at Danielle that way. Not once. Terrence pulled me aside one Sunday and said, "Bro, just let her stay. It's not worth splitting the family over." I said, "She's trying to claim ownership of my house, Terrence. My house that I bought, that I pay for." He shrugged and said, "She's family." Family. That word became a weapon. Every time I tried to enforce a boundary, someone swung it at me like a bat. The court date finally came 4 months after I filed. 4 months of living in a Cold War inside my own home. I showed up with Greg. Danielle showed up with her legal aid lawyer. The judge reviewed everything, the lack of a lease, the lack of rent payments, the school enrollment. I never authorized the change locks. Danielle's lawyer tried the verbal agreement angle. The judge asked Danielle directly, "Did the plaintiff ever agree to a permanent living arrangement?" Danielle hesitated. She looked at me. Then she said, "He said I could stay as long as I needed." The judge looked at me. I said a few weeks. I never agreed to anything permanent. I never agreed to co-ownership. I never agreed to school enrollment. The judge ruled in my favor. Danielle had 30 days to vacate. She didn't speak to me for the rest of that month. She moved out on day 29 into a 2-bedroom apartment in Whitehall that my mother co-signed for. On her way out, she left the basement trashed. Holes in the drywall. Stains on the carpet I'd installed myself. The bathroom faucet was leaking. She'd never told me. There was a note on the counter. It said, "Hope you're happy." I spent the next 2 weekends repairing what she'd damaged. Patching walls, replacing carpet, fixing the faucet, working in silence in a space I had built with my own hands, a space I had offered freely out of love. My mother still brings it up at Sunday dinner. She says I tore the family apart. She says Danielle is struggling. She says those kids miss their uncle. And every time I sit there and eat my food and say nothing because I learned something in those 4 months that no one in my family wants to hear, love without boundaries isn't love. It's an invitation to be consumed. I still own my house. I still pay my mortgage on time. basement is finished again, clean, quiet, and empty. And the spare key sits in my junk drawer where it will stay. I'm never handing it to anyone again.
Story 4.
I used to love coming home after a 12-hour shift. Kicking off my shoes, pouring a glass of cheap wine, running a bath so hot it turned my skin pink. My apartment on the second floor of a graystone in Logan Square was the first place that ever felt like mine. 800 square feet of freedom. I want you to remember that feeling, that sense of safety, because I need you to understand what it means when someone takes it from you. My name is Dana. I'm 27. I'm a trauma nurse at Stroger Hospital, which means I spend my nights elbow deep in the worst things people do to each other. I thought I understood violence. I thought I understood predators. I didn't know one was living directly above me. The first sign was small. So small, I almost feel stupid talking about it. I came home one Tuesday in November and my bathroom towel was on the wrong hook. Left hook instead of right. I'm particular about things you have to be when you work in a hospital, but I told myself I was tired. I told myself I probably moved it and forgot. Then it was the window. I always lock the window above the fire escape before I leave. Always. But I came home and it was unlocked. Not open, just unlocked. Like someone wanted a way back in. I mentioned it to my landlord, Gerald Voss. 62 years old, retired electrician, lived on the third floor. He'd been perfectly pleasant when I signed the lease. Helped me carry boxes up the stairs. Told me to call him Jerry. When I told him about the window, he frowned and said the building was old, that latches sometimes slipped. He said he'd look into it. A week later, I came home and smelled cologne. Not mine. Not any product I own. A sharp woody scent hanging in the bathroom air like someone had just been standing there. I changed the locks that night. Deadbolt chain, the works. I paid a locksmith $160 I didn't really have, and I slept better for exactly 4 days. Then I came home from a double shift and found a new scratch around the deadbolt. Fresh brass shavings on the floor, so small you'd miss them if you weren't looking. But I was looking now. I changed the locks again. Different brand, higher security. I also bought a cheap indoor camera, one of those little white ones you stick on a shelf, and pointed it at the front door. The next day I checked the footage from work on my lunch break. At 11:47 a.m. my front door opened. Gerald Voss walked in carrying a small toolkit. He moved through my apartment like he owned it, which technically he did, but there was nothing to fix. No maintenance request. No emergency. He walked to the bathroom, stayed in there for 6 minutes, then left. He locked the door behind him with what I can only assume was a master key he'd had cut. I felt sick. Physically sick. I went to the bathroom at the hospital and threw up my coffee. But I didn't call the police. Not yet. Because I knew what they'd say. Landlord entered the unit without notice. It's a lease violation, not a crime. File a complaint with the city. I'd seen enough people dismissed by the system to know that creepy doesn't move the needle. I needed more. So I went home that night and I searched. I searched every inch of that apartment like I was prepping a trauma bay, methodical, thorough, missing nothing. I checked the outlets, the vents, the light fixtures. I checked behind the mirror. I checked the carbon monoxide detector in the hallway. Then I climbed onto the edge of my bathtub and looked at the smoke detector directly above it. It was hardwired into the ceiling, which made sense for an old building. But when I unscrewed the cover and pulled it down, my hands started shaking. There was a pinhole camera nestled inside. Tiny. Professional grade. Wired directly into the building's electrical, so it never needed batteries. A thin Ethernet cable ran from it up through a drilled hole in the ceiling up into the third floor. Into Gerald's apartment. I stood there on the edge of my bathtub holding this thing, and the room tilted. Every bath I'd taken, every time I'd stepped out of the shower, every night I'd stood in front of that mirror. He'd seen all of it. I wanted to rip it out. Every cell in my body screamed at me to tear it from the ceiling and smash it on the floor. But I didn't. Because that camera was evidence, and evidence was the only thing that was going to put him away. I put the cover back on. I climbed down. And then I sat on my bathroom floor and cried so hard I couldn't breathe. When I was done, I washed my face and I got to work. I called my friend Marcus, who works in IT at Northwestern. I told him everything. He came over that night with a laptop and a network scanner. We traced the Ethernet cable signal. It was streaming to a local server, not cloud-based local, and Marcus was able to identify the device's MAC address and the IP it was routing to. The server was registered to the residential address directly above mine. Gerald Voss. 3rd floor. Marcus looked at me and said, "Dana, this isn't a lease violation. This is a felony." Illinois is a 2-party consent state for recording. Unauthorized video surveillance in a bathroom is a Class 4 felony video exploitation of a private space. If he was storing the footage, that's additional charges. If he was distributing it, we were talking federal. But here's the thing, no one tells you about gathering evidence against someone who lives 12 feet above your head. You still have to sleep there. You still have to hear his footsteps on the ceiling. You still have to walk past his door on the stairs and smile and say good morning, because if he suspects anything, if he thinks for 1 second that you know, he will destroy that server and every file on it, and it becomes your word against his. So I performed. For 9 days, I performed. I kept my routine exactly the same. I showered at the hospital when I could, but I still had to use the bathroom at home. I hung a towel over the smoke detector like it had fallen from the hook, casual enough to seem accidental. I smiled at Gerald in the hallway. I asked him about the Bears game. And every night I lay in bed knowing he was up there, probably watching a feed of my empty bathroom, waiting for the towel to come down. Meanwhile, Marcus and I documented everything. We had the footage from my shelf camera showing Gerald entering without permission 3 separate occasions. We had photographs of the pinhole camera in situ. We had the network trace linking the camera's feed to his address. I kept a written log with dates, times, and descriptions of every anomaly I had noticed going back to September. On day 9, I walked into the Chicago Police Department's 14th District Station and asked to speak with a detective. I brought a folder 2 inches thick. The detective's name was Rojas. She was maybe 40 and she didn't blink when I laid it all out. She looked at the network trace, looked at the photographs, and said, "We're going to need a warrant for his unit and I want to move fast." She asked me one question I'll never forget. She said, "How long do you think this has been going on?" I told her I'd lived there 14 months. She closed her eyes for just a second. Then she picked up the phone. They executed the warrant 2 days later. I wasn't there. Rojas made me stay at Marcus's place. She called me at 4 p.m. They found the server. They found 14 months of footage. They found footage of the previous tenant too, a woman named Kiko, who'd lived there for 2 years before me. Gerald had built a library. Organized by date. Hundreds of hours. He was arrested in his living room still wearing his slippers. He told the officers it was his building and he had a right to monitor his property. He said it with a straight face. Gerald Voss was charged with 2 counts of unauthorized video recording, 1 count of video exploitation, and 1 count of unlawful surveillance. The state's attorney added a charge of criminal trespass after reviewing my shelf camera footage. He posted bail. His attorney tried to argue the cameras were part of a security system. The judge wasn't buying it. I broke my lease that week. I didn't ask for my deposit back. I moved into a studio in Pilsen that cost more than I can comfortably afford, and the first thing I did was check every smoke detector, every vent, every outlet. I still do that every single day. Keiko and I are both cooperating with the prosecution. We've never met in person, but we've talked on the phone twice. The second time she cried and told me she'd always felt something was wrong in that apartment, but convinced herself she was being paranoid. That's the thing about this kind of violation. It makes you doubt your own instincts. It makes you feel crazy for trusting the feeling in your gut. And then when you find out you were right, you don't feel vindicated. You feel sick. Because your gut was screaming the whole time and you kept telling it to shut up. Gerald Voss is awaiting trial. He still owns the building. And somewhere in that gray stone in Logan Square, there might be wires in the walls I never found. I try not to think about that. But I do. Every night I do.
Story 5.
I was 23 steps into the happiest walk of my life when I saw him. Third row aisle, seat right side. Gray suit I didn't recognize. Same jaw. Same cold, pale eyes that used to pin me to the wall before his hands ever touched me. My father. Sitting in my wedding, smiling at me like he had every right to be there. My bouquet started shaking before I understood why. My body knew before my brain caught up. It always does with him. Let me back up. I met Daniel my junior year of college. He was kind in a way that confused me at first because I'd never really experienced kindness from a man without conditions attached. We dated for 3 years before he proposed, and in that time, I told him everything. The cigarette burns on my left shoulder blade, the fractured wrist when I was 9 that my mother told the ER was from a bicycle accident, the years of silence after I finally cut my father off at 17 when I moved in with my aunt and uncle and started the slow, brutal work of learning that not every closed door meant someone was coming to hurt me. Daniel held me through all of it. He never pushed. He never minimized. And when we started planning the wedding, there was exactly one non-negotiable. I laid on the table my father would not be there. Not invited. Not informed. Not mentioned. I hadn't spoken to him in 7 years, and I intended to keep it that way. Daniel agreed immediately. He told his family. He was clear about it. Or at least I thought he was. His mother, Patricia, is the kind of woman who smiles while she's cutting you. She's got this way of making everything sound reasonable, even when it's insane. When I first told her briefly, without details, because she didn't deserve my details, that my father wouldn't be at the wedding, she tilted her head and said, "Oh, sweetheart, every father deserves to see his daughter get married." I said no. Daniel said no. We said no together, separately and in writing. When we sent out the invitations and his name wasn't on any list. I thought that was the end of it. Patricia had other plans. I found out later after everything fell apart exactly what she did. She went through Daniel's phone while he was in the shower one weekend they visited. Found my father's name in an old contact list Daniel had saved from my phone years ago, back when I still kept the number just in case I ever needed a restraining order. Patricia took that number. She called my father. She told him the date, the venue, the time. She told him his daughter would love to have him there, but was too proud to ask. She fabricated an entire reconciliation narrative in her head. And then she made it real. The vineyard was small. 60 guests. October light coming through the grape leaves, golden and soft, the kind of light that makes everything look like a painting. I'd chosen this place because it felt safe. Intimate. Controllable. I could see every face from the altar. That was the point. My aunt walked me down the aisle. She was the one who saved me, who took me in, who sat with me through the nightmares. She was crying before we even started walking. I was holding it together, smiling, looking toward Daniel at the end of the aisle in his navy suit, and I was thinking, this is it. This is the moment my life starts being mine. Then my eyes drifted right. And there he was. My aunt felt me stop. She squeezed my arm and whispered, "What's wrong?" I couldn't speak. I physically could not form words. My throat closed like it used to when I was small, when making noise meant making it worse. I just stared at him. And he stared back with this smug, satisfied grin like he'd won something. My aunt followed my gaze. I heard her breath catch. She said one word under her breath that I won't repeat, and then she said, "You don't have to do this." The music was still playing. People were starting to notice I'd stopped. Daniel looked confused at the altar. And I was standing in the middle of the aisle in my grandmother's altered wedding dress, vibrating with a kind of rage and terror I hadn't felt in years. I looked at Daniel. I looked at his face, searching for guilt, for knowledge, for anything. He looked genuinely confused. Then I looked at Patricia seated in the front row, left side. She was beaming. Not at me. At my father. This satisfied, self-righteous beam like she'd just pulled off the most beautiful surprise. Like she was the hero of this story. And that's when I knew exactly who had done this. I turned to my aunt and said, "Hold my flowers." Then I walked. Not toward the altar, toward Patricia. The music stopped. Someone murmured. I didn't care. I stopped directly in front of her and I said loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear, "Did you invite him?" She blinked. Put her hand on her chest. "Sweetheart, I just thought." "Did you invite him?" "He's your father, and I thought, on a day like this..." He broke my arm when I was 9 years old. The vineyard went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that has weight. Patricia's face went through about 4 expressions in 2 seconds. Shock. Doubt. A flicker of something that might have been shame. And then, this is the part that still makes my blood run cold, she settled on irritation. Like I was being dramatic. Like I was ruining her moment. "Well," she said quietly, "I'm sure there are 2 sides to every..." He put cigarettes out on my back, Patricia. My voice cracked, but it didn't break. "I told you he was dangerous. Daniel told you. We told you why. And you went behind our backs and brought him here. To my wedding. The one place I was supposed to be safe. Daniel was beside me now. I don't know when he'd moved from the altar. He looked at his mother, and I watched something die in his eyes. "Mom," he said. "What did you do?" She started crying. Of course she did. The tears came on cue, perfectly timed, and she grabbed Daniel's arm and said I was trying to give her a complete family. I was trying to help. I stepped back from both of them. I looked at my father, who hadn't moved, who was watching all of this with that same detached amusement he always had, like other people's pain was entertainment. Then I looked at Daniel and I said the hardest sentence of my life. If she stays, I go. He didn't hesitate. Not even for a second. He turned to his mother and said, "You need to leave. Now. And take him with you." Patricia gasped like she'd been slapped. "You can't be serious. I'm your mother. I'm not leaving my own son's wedding. You just made my wife's abuser a wedding guest. Get up." His brother stood and quietly took Patricia's arm. My uncle, 6'4", and not in the mood for diplomacy, walked to the 3rd row and stood over my father until he got up and left without a word. Because men like my father are only brave behind closed doors. We didn't get married that day. We got married 3 weeks later in my aunt's backyard with 11 people present. I wore jeans and the veil from my grandmother's dress. Daniel's father came. His brother came. Patricia was not invited. She sent 14 letters since then. I've read none of them. Daniel's read 2. He says they're mostly about how ungrateful we are, how she sacrificed everything for that wedding, how I've poisoned her son against her. Not a single apology. Not one acknowledgement of what she actually did. My therapist says Patricia and my father operate from the same playbook. Different chapters, same book. They both believe their version of reality is the only one that matters, and anyone who challenges it is the enemy. Daniel cut contact with her 2 months after the wedding. That was his choice. I never asked him to, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't relieved. People ask me sometimes if I regret not just walking down the aisle that day, pushing through it, not letting them ruin the moment. No. Because standing still in that aisle, refusing to move forward into a ceremony contaminated by the woman who betrayed me, that was the most powerful thing I've ever done. I spent my entire childhood frozen, compliant, silent. That day I stopped walking because I chose to, and that made all the difference.
Story 6.
The brochure felt heavier than it should, its glossy pages sticking slightly to my fingertips in the humid August air. On the cover, a celestial silver Toyota Camry gleamed under a perfect studio-lit sky. Inside, I'd circled the XSE trim package. Red leather interior. Panoramic glass roof. The works. For 17 years, I'd been a master of practicality. Sensible shoes, used cars, coupons clipped and filed in a worn-out accordion folder. Now, I was about to do something wonderfully, gloriously impractical. I'd earned it. I'd earned it, pulling 1 2-hour shifts as an obstetric sonographer, my eyes burning from staring at grainy black and white screens, searching for the flutter of a new heart. I'd earned it through night classes at community college with my son Liam, then just a toddler asleep in his car seat in the back of the lecture hall. I'd climb my way from a cramped apartment that always smelled of my neighbor's curry to this quiet little house with a garden I mostly killed but loved anyway. This car wasn't just a car. It was a trophy. It was proof. It was for Liam. My brilliant, funny, hardworking Liam, who was about to start his senior year. He'd never once complained about our sputtering 2012 Honda Civic. He just smiled, thanked me for the ride, and never asked for a thing. He deserved this. My ex Kevin had also been handed a trophy once, a full-ride athletic scholarship to a D1 school. He'd taken that trophy and pawned it for poker chips and cheap beer. He dropped out after 2 semesters, racking up a mountain of gambling debt that followed him like a stray dog. Now at 33, he was living in his parents' basement, bouncing between stocking shelves at Target and ringing up PBR at the local gas station. He didn't even have a car. I hadn't seen him in months, which was pretty standard. He'd text Liam on his birthday, maybe throw $20 in a card at Christmas, but that was the extent of his fatherly duties. The person I did talk to, surprisingly, was his sister Chloe. We'd managed to stitch together a functional, friendly relationship over the years for Liam's sake. She was his aunt, after all. She sent him gift cards, came to his soccer games, and always asked how he was doing in school. So, when my phone buzzed with her name, I answered with a genuine smile. "Hey you," I said, setting the Camry brochure on the kitchen counter. "Penny, how are you? How's my favorite nephew?" Her voice was always a little too loud, a little too cheerful, but it was usually a welcome dose of energy. "He's great. Just gearing up for senior year. You know, homecoming plans, college applications, the whole 9 yards." "Oh my God, I can't believe it. It feels like yesterday you were showing me his first ultrasound picture." I laughed. "Trust me, I know. That's actually why I'm so excited. I'm doing something huge for him, top secret." "Ooh, dish, I can keep a secret." I took a deep breath, the thrill of it bubbling up inside me. "Okay, but you can't say a word." "I'm buying him a car." "No way, a car. That's amazing." The Civic finally kicked the bucket. "Not yet, but it's on its last legs." "No, this is a real car. A new one. I'm surprising him with it before school starts." I'm getting him a 2024 Toyota Camry. Silence. Not the excited gasp for air kind of silence. It was a dead, heavy silence that sucked the air out of the room. I could hear the faint sound of a TV in her background. Chloe, I asked, my smile faltering. You there? A new car, she finally said, her voice stripped of its earlier cheer. Like a brand new off-the-lot car. Yeah. The XSE. It's his dream car. He's obsessed with it. Wow, she breathed. But it wasn't a happy wow. It was a shocked, wind knocked out of you wow. Penny, that's a lot. It is, I agreed, my pride puffing my chest out. I've been saving for over a year. He's earned it. I'm sure he has, she said slowly, cautiously. It's just... Have you thought about what this will do to Kevin? I blinked. The question was so far out of left field I almost laughed. What does Kevin have to do with this? Well, think about it, she said, her tone shifting from cautious to condescending like she was explaining something to a child. Your son, his son, gets a brand new $34,000 car. And his dad can't even afford a bus pass half the time. He's carless, Penny. He's 33 and he has nothing. This will absolutely crush him. The thrill I'd been feeling curdled into a hot, tight knot in my stomach. Chloe, with all due respect, managing Kevin's feelings is not my responsibility. It hasn't been for a very long time. This is about Liam. But at times as times about Kevin, how is he supposed to feel like a father? When you're pulling stunts like this, you're making him look like a deadbeat. He times is times a deadbeat, I snapped the words out before I could stop them. He made his choices. He chose gambling over his scholarship. He chose video games in his parents' basement over getting a real career. I chose our son. Every single time. I worked for this. Liam deserves this. End of story. It's not the end of story, she shot back, her voice rising. You're doing this times to times him. I know you are. It's a power move. You're rubbing his face in your success and his failure. I was floored. I stood there in my kitchen, the glossy photo of the silver Camry seeming to mock me from the counter. All the joy, all the pride I'd felt just moments before was gone, replaced by a furious, buzzing indignation. You are unbelievable, I said, my voice low and shaking. This has nothing to do with you or your brother. This is a gift for my son. I'm not going to apologize for being a good mother and providing for him. Being a good mother doesn't mean you have to be a cruel ex, she retorted. You could at least show a little compassion. Think about someone other than yourself for a second. I actually did laugh then, a bitter, humorless sound. I have to go, Chloe. No, wait, Penny, just think about it, she pleaded, a note of desperation creeping in. Just hold off for a few days. Let me talk to him. Maybe we can figure something out. Figure what out? I demanded. There is nothing to figure out. I am buying my son a car. Goodbye. I hung up before she could say another word, my thumb jabbing the screen with more force than necessary. My heart was pounding in my ears. I stared at the phone, half expecting her to call right back. For a few minutes, there was only silence. A deep, unsettling quiet that felt like the air holding its breath before a storm. The quiet lasted for 2 days. 2 days of me second-guessing my own excitement, 2 days of a low-grade anger simmering under my skin. Then on Wednesday afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Chloe. I let it go to voicemail, but she immediately called back. And again. On the third try, I sighed and answered, putting her on speaker. I have a solution, she announced, skipping any preamble. It's an amazing compromise, Penny. I talked to Kevin. My blood ran cold. You told him. It wasn't a question. Of course I told him. How else were we supposed to figure this out? He was upset, obviously, but he understands. He wants to be a part of this. For Liam? I waited, my fingers drumming a silent, furious rhythm on the counter. Go on. Okay, she said, taking a deep, theatrical breath. So Kevin has been saving up. He's going to contribute $80 to the car. I stared at the phone. I must have misheard. 80. Yes. And I'm going to match it. So that's $160 total. From his side of the family. She said it with such magnanimous pride as if she were announcing a multi-million-dollar endowment. I was so stunned I couldn't even form a word. So she continued barreling into the silence. The plan is, you buy the car, we give you the cash, and you tell Liam it's a joint gift. From his mom, times and times his dad. That way Kevin feels included, he doesn't look like a total failure, and he can use this to get closer to Liam. Isn't that great? The silence stretched. It was the sound of 17 years of single motherhood, of scraped knees and late-night fevers of parent-teacher conferences, attended alone and birthday parties paid for on a credit card, all crashing down into one single, crystallized moment of absolute audacity. I picked up the phone, my voice flat and cold as ice. No thanks, Chloe. I have it covered. I hung up. The phone rang again instantly. I ignored it. A text message notification lit up the screen. Asterisk, Chloe. Are you kidding me? Asterisk. Another one? Asterisk. Chloe, I'm trying to help my brother be a father, and you're shutting him down, asterisk. The phone rang again. I silenced it, but the text kept coming, a rapid-fire assault. Asterisk, Chloe, you are the most selfish idiot I have ever met. Asterisk. Asterisk, Chloe. It's $160. You won't even let him do that much for his own son. Asterisk. Asterisk, Chloe, you are doing this just to hurt him. I knew it. Asterisk. The phone rang a fourth time. This time I answered my patience, completely gone. What I snapped. You have two choices, she shrieked, her voice cracking with fury. Either you let Kevin chip in and take credit for the car, or you don't buy the car at all. You will not humiliate my brother like this. An ultimatum. She was giving me an ultimatum about a gift I'd saved for a gift for my son, a gift that had absolutely nothing to do with her or the 33-year-old man-child living in her parents' basement. I was no longer just angry, I was baffled. I felt like I'd been dropped into a different dimension, where I was responsible for the fragile ego of the man who chose a poker table over his own family. Where my success was a weapon and my son's happiness was collateral damage. Let me make sure I understand, I said, my voice dangerously calm. You want me to either lie to my son about a $34,000 gift or cancel it entirely to protect the feelings of your deadbeat brother. He's not a deadbeat, he's just had a hard time. Goodbye, Chloe. I hung up and immediately blocked her number. Then I blocked Kevin's. Then, just to be thorough, I blocked their mothers. I sat in the ringing silence of my kitchen, my hands shaking. The joy was gone. They had tainted it, smeared their grubby entitled fingerprints all over my beautiful, perfect plan. For about an hour, I let myself fume. I paced. I cursed them both out loud to my empty house. I almost considered calling the whole thing off, just trading in the Civic for a slightly less old Civic. Let them win. Let them keep their pathetic pride intact. Then I looked at the brochure on the counter. The gleaming silver car. The red leather. I thought of Liam's face. I thought of every single sacrifice, every long shift, every lonely night I had pushed through to get to this moment. And I thought times. Oh, hell no. Asterisks. My rage cooled and hardened into something sharp and clear. An idea bloomed in my mind, a perfect, petty, and deeply satisfying idea. I unblocked Chloe's number. My thumbs flew across the screen. Asterisk. Me. You know what? You're right. I was being selfish. I will accept Kevin's contribution. Asterisk. Her reply was almost instantaneous. Asterisk. Chloe, I'm so glad you're seeing reason. This is what's best for Liam. Asterisk. I smiled, a real sharp-edged smile. I opened the Venmo app. I typed in Chloe's username, the one I used to send Liam gift money from her. I hit the request button. Amount? $160. For 0.47% of Liam's 2024 Toyota Camry. Per our agreement, I hit send. Then I blocked her number again for good this time. The next morning, I walked into the Toyota dealership alone. The air smelled of new rubber and clean plastic. I found the silver XSE from the brochure sitting on the showroom floor, its paint job so pristine it looked wet. I ran my hand over the cool metal of the hood. This was mine. I did this. An hour later, I was sitting in the driver's seat, the red leather soft beneath me. I gripped the steering wheel, the keys, a heavy, solid weight of accomplishment in my hand. I hadn't just bought a car. I had bought my freedom from their drama. I had refused to let a deadbeat's pathetic insecurity dictate my son's happiness. I had paid in full, and my name was the only one on the title. I backed the car out of the spot, the engine a low, satisfying hum. I was going to get the biggest, reddest bow I could find. And when Liam saw this car, his car, the story he would hear would be the truth, that it came from his mother who loved him, who worked hard for him, and who would never ever let anyone else take credit for it.
Story 7.
I've always been the guy who fixes things. Leaky faucet, bad investment, broken heart, didn't matter. I'd roll up my sleeves and make it right. So when my son Leo sat me down at the kitchen table, looking like he was about to confess to a felony, I prepared to fix his life. He was 18, a good kid with a bright future. Dad, he started, his voice cracking. Kate's pregnant. I just nodded. No yelling, no panic. Panic doesn't solve problems. Okay, I said, my voice even. First, we make a plan. And I did. They were kids living with their respective parents, working part-time jobs at the mall. They couldn't raise a baby in their childhood bedrooms. So I moved them in with me. It was a big house. Way too big since my wife passed, and the quiet was starting to get to me anyway. I gave them the entire second floor. Kate was a sweet girl, if a little shy. Scared mostly. Her own parents were less than thrilled, offering a lot of "I told you so" and not much else. I stepped in. I wanted them to know they weren't alone. This baby wasn't a mistake. It was a new chapter. My big project one was the nursery. The room next to theirs was just collecting dust, so I went to work. I didn't just slap some paint on the walls. I mean, I did that a nice soft gray, but I did everything else too. I spent a weekend assembling a top-of-the-line crib, a matching dresser with a changing table on top, and a glider rocking chair that cost more than my first car. I hung little animal prints on the walls and installed blackout curtains. When I was done, it looked like something out of a magazine. Kate cried when she saw it. Real happy tears. Gabriel, you didn't have to do all this, she whispered, running her hand over the smooth wood of the crib. Of course I did, I said, clapping Leo on the shoulder. I'm going to be a grandpa. This is what we do. They were good kids. They saved their money, Leo got a promotion at the electronics store, and Kate found a remote data entry job she could do from home. 6 months in, they told me they'd found their own place, a small 2-bedroom apartment about 15 minutes away. I'll admit a part of me was sad to see them go, but I was bursting with pride. This was the goal. I had given them the foundation, and now they were building their own life on it. I helped them move, of course, hauling boxes and setting up the nursery furniture I'd bought, making sure it looked perfect in their new home. Everything was going smoothly until the final month. The doctors found an issue with the baby's position breech, they called it. A C-section was scheduled for the 15th. Leo called me with the news. "Dad, they set the date. Tuesday, the 15th, 8 a.m. "Got it," I said already, pulling up the calendar on my phone. "I'll clear my schedule. I'll be there by 7. Do you need me to bring coffee?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. A weirdly long one. "Dad, hang on." I heard some muffled whispering, and then Kate's voice came on the phone. It was lighter than Leo's, but it had a strange tension to it. "Hi, Gabriel." "Hey, Kate." "Getting excited?" "Yeah, definitely." A little nervous, she said. "Listen about visitors at the hospital. Leo and I have been talking and we've decided we don't want anyone there." I laughed. "Right. You don't want a whole parade of your high school friends coming through." "I get it. Don't worry. It'll just be me." "No," she said, and the word was suddenly sharp. "I mean no one. Except my sister Sarah. She's going to be my support person." The gears in my head screeched to a halt. "What are you talking about? I'm the grandfather." "I'm not a visitor." "I know, and we're so grateful for everything. But I'm going to be recovering from major surgery. I want those first couple of days to be just for us to bond as a family. And, well, to figure out breastfeeding, I need my privacy." Privacy. The word felt like a slap. After everything I'd done, the room, the furniture, the financial support, the goddamn emotional stability I'd provided when her own family wouldn't. She wanted times privacy, times from me. "Kate, that doesn't make any sense," I said, trying to keep my voice reasonable. "I'm not going to be watching you breastfeed. I just want to meet my grandson." "There's another thing too," she said, her voice getting even more formal. "The hospital is very strict about who can be around the baby. Have you had your Tdap booster recently?" "For whooping cough." I scoffed. "A shot. That's what this is about. I can go get a shot, Kate." "That's not a problem." It was just one more ridiculous hurdle she was throwing up. One more excuse. "It's not just the shot, Gabriel," she said, her frustration finally showing. "This is a C-section. It's a serious operation. I'm going to be in pain and I'm not going to be up for entertaining." This is where I lost my patience. I'd seen this surgery in movies 100 times. I knew what it was. She was being dramatic. Entertaining. Who's asking you to entertain? It's a C-section, Kate, not open heart surgery. They make an incision, they take the baby out, they stitch you up. You'll be fine. It's not like you'll be bleeding all over the place or anything. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It was so cold I felt it through the phone. I knew I'd messed up, but I couldn't figure out how. I was just stating facts. I decided to offer a solution. A perfectly logical compromise. "Look," I said, my voice softening. "I get it. You want your space. Fine. How about this? You can stay in your room all private for as long as you want. Leo can just bring the baby out to the waiting room for me. I'll hold him for 10 minutes, meet my grandson, and then I'll leave. You won't even have to see me." I waited, proud of my brilliant, simple fix. It gave her exactly what she said she wanted while still letting me have the one thing I cared about. Another long, terrifying silence stretched out. When Kate finally spoke, her voice was completely different. It was low, tight, and vibrating with a fury I had never heard from her before. "Let me be perfectly clear, Gabriel." Each word was a chip of ice. "Nobody is taking my newborn baby away from me. Not for a second. Not you. Not anyone." The line went dead. Not a hang-up slam, just a cold final click. I stared at my phone, the silence roaring in my ears. Fury, hot and pure, burned through me. This wasn't about privacy. This was a power play. I immediately redialed. Leo picked up on the first ring, his voice tentative. Dad. Put her back on the phone, I commanded. She's not going to. I don't give a damn what she's going to do, Leo. I am your father. I gave you a roof over your head when you had nowhere else to go. I built a nursery for your son with my own 2 hands. I have earned the right to meet my grandson. The words tumbled out, each one coated in the acid of betrayal. It's not about earning anything, Dad. It's her body. It's her recovery. Her body, I laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. This is what this is. She's a narcissist, Leo. She's making this all about her. What about you? What about your father? Do we not matter? Are we just walking ATMs to you? I didn't just give you money. I gave you a foundation. I bought you stability. And now I'm being treated like some infectious disease. That's not fair, he shot back, his voice finally gaining some steel. She's not a narcissist. She's scared. She's about to have surgery, and she wants comfort and privacy, not a performance. A performance, 10 minutes. I asked for 10 minutes to hold the baby I practically paid for. I feel completely and utterly exploited. I poured my heart, my time, and my money into setting you 2 up for success, and this is the thanks I get. Banned from the hospital. You're just a poor boy caught in the middle, letting her run the whole show. Stop. The word was quiet, but absolute. Don't call me a poor boy, and don't talk about my wife like that. My wife. He'd never called her that before. The word cemented them into a unit, a fortress, with the drawbridge pulled up, leaving me outside. Unbelievable, I muttered, shaking my head at the kitchen wall. She's got you completely brainwashed. No, Leo said, his voice heavy with a finality that chilled me to the bone. She's got my back. And I've got hers. We'll call you when we're home and ready for visitors. He hung up. I stood there, phone in my hand, vibrating with a rage so profound it left me breathless. They were ungrateful. She was manipulative. He was weak. I was the victim here, the generous patriarch being cast aside by a selfish girl who had poisoned my son's mind. Fine. If they wouldn't listen to reason, maybe the rest of the world would. I stormed to my laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. I found a forum, one of those Am I the Asshole places. I laid it all out, the unexpected pregnancy, how I took them in the thousands I spent on the nursery, the apartment, the pride I felt. I painted myself as the supportive, heroic grandfather. Then I described Kate's sudden, inexplicable demand for privacy, her ridiculous excuse about a booster shot, and her refusal of my perfectly reasonable compromise. I framed her as ungrateful and controlling. I called my son a poor boy caught in the middle. I hit post and waited for the validation to roll in. It didn't. The first comment appeared within a minute. YTA. C-sections are major abdominal surgery. Your comment that she wouldn't be bleeding is one of the most ignorant things I've ever read. Another followed. YTA. A nurse here. Post-Gabriel C-section patients bleed heavily. It's called lochia. They have a catheter. They're on narcotics. And they're trying to learn how to feed a baby with a 6-inch incision in their abdomen. The last thing she needs is her overbearing father-in-law demanding a meet and greet. The post came in like a tidal wave, a deluge of acronyms and brutal honesty. YTA. YTA. Major YTA. You didn't give them a gift. You bought a ticket. Your generosity came with strings attached. And now you're pissed they won't let you cash it in. She's not a narcissist for having boundaries. You're an entitled asshole for trying to stomp all over them. Poor boy caught in the middle. He's a father. He's a partner. His job is to support his recovering wife and newborn, not cater to his daddy's hurt feelings. He's not caught in the middle. He's exactly where he's supposed to be, on their side. Each comment was a punch to the gut. I read them for an hour, my righteous anger slowly deflating, replaced by a cold, creeping shame. They were right. All of them. My ignorance about the C-section was appalling. My compromise wasn't a compromise. It was a demand to separate a mother from her baby moments after birth. My generosity wasn't selfless. It was a transaction. Why had I been like this? Staring at the screen at the unanimous verdict from hundreds of strangers, the truth finally broke through the wall of anger I'd built around myself. It wasn't about entitlement, not really. It was about terror. 2 years ago, I was in a hospital waiting room just like the one I'd planned to be in for Leo. My wife Eleanor was in labor with our second child, a girl we were going to name Chloe. There were complications. Preeclampsia, they said. It happened fast. 1 minute I was expecting to meet my daughter, the next a grim-faced doctor was telling me they couldn't stop the bleeding. I lost them both. I never fixed it. I couldn't. I just stood there useless while my world ended. This time with Kate and Leo, I thought I could control it. I could provide, plan, and protect. I could be there on site ready to fix anything that went wrong. My desperate need to be at that hospital wasn't about meeting my grandson. It was an irrational, deep-seated terror that if I wasn't there, I would lose them too. My control wasn't about power. It was about panic. The shame was absolute. I hadn't been a supportive father. I had been a bully terrorizing two scared kids because I couldn't face my own ghosts. My hands trembled as I typed out an update to my post. Update. You're all right. I am the asshole. No question. I read every single comment, and you've shown me something I was refusing to see. I was wrong entitled, and my behavior was inexcusable. There's no excuse, but there is a reason. 2 years ago, my wife and infant daughter died from complications during childbirth. I was in the waiting room when it happened. I think I've been driven by a terrible fear that I can't explain, and I took it out on my son and his girlfriend. I tried to control their birth experience because I had no control over my wife's death. It's not their burden to carry, it's mine. I'm going to call my son and apologize. I'm going to a clinic tomorrow to get my Tdap booster. And then I'm going to wait until they are ready. Until they invite me. Thank you for the wake-up call. I closed the laptop. The house was silent again, but it felt different now. The quiet wasn't empty. It was heavy with the weight of my mistakes. I had one more thing to fix. But this time it was myself.
Story 8.
I love my lawn. That probably sounds pathetic, but it's the truth. It's my one patch of zen in a world of conference calls and toddler tantrums. It's green, it's thick, it's meticulously edged. My 2 kids, a 5-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl, tumble on it like it's a safety mat. It's my pride. Or at least it was. The problem lives in my basement. My mother-in-law, Carol. She moved in 3 years ago after her husband passed. The deal was simple. She gets the basement suite rent-free, and in return she helps with the kids while my wife and I work. On paper, it's a perfect arrangement. In reality, it's a slow-motion demolition of my property and my sanity. The first incident was the cedars. I planted a row of them along the back fence 5 years ago. They'd finally grown into a beautiful, dense privacy screen. One Saturday I came out to find them sculpted. She'd taken shears to them, carving them into these bizarre, lumpy poodle shapes. They needed some style, she'd announced, beaming. I just stared, speechless. My lush natural wall was gone, replaced by something you'd see at a Tim Burton-themed mini-golf course. My wife, Sarah, just shrugged. She's trying to help Terry. It's not a big deal. The next year, it was the hedge. We have a massive laurel hedge separating our property from the neighbors. It's a beast to maintain, but it's worth it. Carol decided the path to the side gate was too long. It required walking an extra 15 feet around the hedge. So she took a saw and hacked a tunnel straight through the middle of it. A jagged, ugly wound right in the heart of a 30-year-old plant. When I confronted her, she looked at me like I was insane. "It's more efficient," she said, as if that explained everything. The hedge never recovered. It's still got a big brown dead patch that screams shortcut. Sarah's response: "Mom's getting older. It's easier for her. Let it go." But the real masterpiece, the project that set the stage for this year's disaster, was the Great Garden Heist. I had a small decorative perennial garden near the back patio. Nothing fancy, just some hostas, black-eyed Susans, a few lavender plants. It was my little spot of color. I came home from a business trip to find it gone. Every single plant had been ripped out and tossed in the compost. In its place were 3 rows of tomato stakes and some wilting lettuce. Carol had decided my flower garden was a waste of good sun. She needed more room for her vegetables. I lost it. I yelled. I asked her what gave her the right to just tear up my yard. She just folded her arms. "We need fresh tomatoes, not useless flowers." Sarah pulled me inside. "She's contributing. She's growing food for our family. You're getting upset over a few weeds." They weren't weeds. They were my plants in my garden in my yard. But to Sarah, I was the bad guy for not appreciating her mother's contribution. I was outnumbered. I dropped it. The tomatoes were mediocre. That was last summer. I spent the whole winter stewing, but also hoping. Maybe, just maybe, she had finally run out of things to destroy. Then the first warm Saturday of spring arrived. The snow had melted, the air was crisp. I was practically vibrating with excitement. Time to get the yard back in shape. I pulled the cover off the mower, checked the oil, filled the gas. My son Leo was buzzing around me. "Can I help Daddy?" "You bet, buddy. You can be my supervisor." I pulled the cord. The engine roared to life. It was the best sound in the world. I started on the first pass along the back of the house. A long, satisfying stripe of freshly cut grass appearing behind me. It felt good. It felt right. As I rounded the corner of the patio, the engine sputtered. Then came a sound that made my blood run cold. Asterisk. Crunch. Screech. Whomp. Asterisk. A shower of sparks flew out from under the mower deck. The engine died with a shudder. I froze, my hands tingling from the vibration. "Son of a bitch," I muttered. I tilted the mower on its side. The blade which I had just sharpened last fall was a disaster. A huge, jagged chunk was missing from the cutting edge, the metal warped and bent. Something had annihilated it. I looked down at the lawn to see what I'd hit, and that's when I saw it. It was a ramp. A crude, ugly ramp made of dirt and gravel leading from the lawn up to the 2-inch lip of the concrete patio. It was about 3 feet wide and packed down hard. The grass underneath my perfect green grass was a dead yellow smear. Loose gravel was scattered all over the surrounding lawn, a minefield of blade-destroying rocks. My son's little red ride-on car was parked at the top of it. I knelt down and poked the ramp. It wasn't just dirt. It was compacted like concrete. She must have spent hours piling it on, tamping it down, watering it into a solid mass. All so Leo could drive his plastic car onto the patio without navigating a 2-inch bump. A bump he could have easily bypassed by just driving 10 feet to the left, where the patio meets the walkway at ground level. Rage hot and pure washed over me. This wasn't helping. This was malicious. It was a flag planted in the middle of my sanctuary, a declaration that nothing I owned was truly mine. I spent the next 4 hours in a silent fury. I got a shovel and a wheelbarrow. The ramp didn't want to give up. I had to hack at it, breaking up the concrete like soil chunk by chunk. Underneath the ground was a soulless, compacted wasteland. I shoveled the whole mess out, raked the area until my back screamed, picking out every last piece of gravel by hand. Then I went to the garage, got the bags of topsoil and grass seed I'd bought for spring overseeding, and carefully rebuilt the patch. I leveled it, seeded it, fertilized it, and watered it gently. By the time the sun started to dip, it was done. A perfect dark brown rectangle of fresh soil sat where the ramp had been. Order was restored. I stood there leaning on the rake, exhausted but satisfied. I had taken back my lawn. I heard the basement door slide open behind me. I didn't turn around. I just kept admiring my work. The footsteps stopped a few feet away. "What did you do?" Carol's voice was sharp accusatory. I took a deep breath, then slowly turned to face her. Her arms were crossed, her face a mask of indignation. "I fixed it," I said, keeping my voice level. "You ruined it," she snapped. "That was for Leo. He needs his ramp. You're going to build it back, right now." I laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was sharp and brittle, the noise a man makes when he's reached the absolute end of his rope. "Build it back," I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "Carol, you destroyed my lawnmower. You spent hours compacting soil over my grass, killing it for a problem that didn't exist." "Leo couldn't get his car up," she insisted, jabbing a finger toward the patio. My composure snapped. I marched over to the little red plastic car, grabbed it by its steering wheel, and dragged it off the patio. I pushed it across the grass for 10 feet, to where the concrete walkway meets the patio flush with the ground. Then with one hand, I easily rolled it onto the concrete. I turned back to her, spreading my arms. "See? Problem solved. No destruction necessary. This took me 5 seconds. Your ramp took you hours and cost me a $100 mower blade and a patch of my lawn." Her face went from indignant to thunderous. She didn't see logic. She saw defiance. She saw me undoing her work. She gave a disgusted ch sound, spun on her heel, and stormed back to the basement, slamming the sliding door so hard the glass rattled. I knew what was coming next. I had about 90 seconds. I was still standing there, hands on my hips, breathing hard, when the back door of the house opened. Sarah stepped out, phone pressed to her ear. She was listening, her expression hardening with every word Carol poured into her head. She hung up and fixed me with a glare that could melt steel. "What is wrong with you?" she asked, her voice laced with ice. "What's wrong with times meet times? Sarah, look at this." I gestured at the fresh patch of soil, the scattered gravel. I hadn't managed to find the deep gouge in the lawn where the mower had died. "She built a damn construction project on our lawn. She broke my mower." "My mother was building something for our son," she said, walking toward me. "She was trying to be helpful, and you just tore it down and screamed at her." I didn't scream. I shot back, my voice rising. I showed her the perfectly good path that already exists. This was needless destruction, Sarah. Just like the cedars, just like the hedge, just like my flower garden. When does it stop? When does this become my time's house again? It's her house, too. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at her, dumbfounded. What? She lives in the basement. We own the house. I pay the mortgage. I maintain the yard. And she provides full-time childcare, so we don't have to pay a fortune for daycare, Sarah shot back. That gives her a say. This is her home, not just a room you let her use. She has the right to feel comfortable here. She has the right to do projects. I felt a dizzying sense of unreality. We were standing in the middle of the yard I spent every weekend caring for, and my wife was telling me her mother had the right to demolish it at will. A say is, "Hey Terry, I think it would be nice if we built a little ramp for Leo." Not taking a shovel and gravel and unilaterally deciding to pave over the lawn, she doesn't have the right to destroy our property. Sarah. Then she said it. The sentence that vaporized whatever ground I thought I was standing on. She crossed her arms, mirroring her mother perfectly, and said with chilling finality, "She has the right to do whatever she wants to our property. She lives here. I just stared. I had nothing. No response. No argument. The logic was so warped, so completely insane that I couldn't even begin to formulate a reply. It was like arguing with someone who insisted the sky was green. My wife, my partner, the person who was supposed to be in my corner, was standing in front of me telling me I was a tenant in my own home. And the landlord was Carol. I turned away from her. I couldn't even look at her. I walked to the garage, grabbed a beer from the old fridge, and just sat on a stool in the silence, surrounded by the smell of cut grass and gasoline. I stayed there until the sun went down. Later that night, the house was quiet. The kids were in bed. I was in the living room pretending to watch TV. Sarah came and stood in the doorway, refusing to sit next to me. I talked to my mom, she said. Her tone wasn't conciliatory. It was the voice of a messenger. I didn't say anything. I just kept my eyes on the screen. She's very upset. She feels completely disrespected and unappreciated. She said that if you're going to criticize everything she does to try and help, then maybe you should see how you like it without her help. I muted the TV and finally looked at her. What does that mean? It means if you don't like her methods, you can watch the kids yourself, Sarah said flatly. You can pay for daycare. But she's not going to be treated like a child in her own home and get screamed at for building a ramp for her grandson. There it was, the checkmate. They had tied her free childcare, the cornerstone of our family's finances, to her absolute unquestionable right to hack, dig, and pave any part of my property she saw fit. Objecting to the destruction of my yard was now an attack on her role as a grandmother. Complaining about a broken lawnmower meant I didn't appreciate her watching our children. I felt a profound, bottomless exhaustion. This wasn't a fight I could win. I was being outmaneuvered by a united front that operated on an emotional logic I couldn't penetrate. My enemy wasn't the woman in the basement who butchered my hedges. It was the woman standing in my living room delivering ultimatums on her behalf. So, I'm just supposed to let her do whatever she wants, no boundaries, no respect for my work, my things. I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You need to apologize to her, Sarah said, ignoring my question entirely. And you need to get over your obsession with a stupid lawn. It's not as important as family. She turned and walked to our bedroom without another word. I sat there in the dark, the silent television flickering. Family. This didn't feel like family. It felt like I was an outsider, a groundskeeper whose duties and opinions were irrelevant. The lawn wasn't the point. It was the only thing left that was mine, and they were taking that too. I opened my laptop. My hands were trembling slightly as I navigated to the Reddit page. Am I the asshole? I had to know. I had to ask someone outside this crazy bubble if I was the one who had lost his mind. I started to type. Am I the bad guy for getting angry at my MIL for destroying my lawn?
Story 9.
I met Daniel where all good girls in my town met their future husbands. The 1030 a.m. service at Grace Chapel. He was new, visiting with his cousin, and he had that clean-cut, earnest look I was raised to believe was the hallmark of a God-fearing man. He had kind eyes and a firm handshake. And when he said he was looking for a church home, a little voice in my head whispered times, "This is it. This is him." Asterisk. Our first date was for coffee after service the following Sunday. He was magnetic. He talked about his mission trip to Guatemala, his volunteer work at the youth center, and his desire for a family built on a foundation of faith. The words poured out of him, a perfect script of everything I'd ever prayed for. The most important thing to me, he said, leaning forward over his lukewarm latte, is purity. Honoring God with our bodies and our relationship until we're married. I felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost knocked me over. I dated guys who'd pushed, who'd wheedled, who'd made me feel like an old-fashioned prude for holding on to my convictions. But Daniel got it. He didn't just accept my boundaries, he shared them. He was in a word safe. The courtship was a whirlwind. It was 9 months of hand-holding during movies, chaste kisses on my front porch, and long talks about the future. We planned our dream home, named our hypothetical children 2 boys, 1 girl, and read devotionals together over the phone. He was everything. Respectful, charming, and deeply spiritual. My parents adored him. My friends were jealous. I was floating. When he got down on one knee in the middle of the town square, a tiny velvet box in his hand, I didn't hesitate. Saying yes was the easiest decision I'd ever made. Our wedding was small and quaint, exactly what I wanted. We held it in the little chapel where we met, surrounded by our closest family and friends. I remember the scent of the white roses on the altar, and the way the afternoon light streamed through the stained glass windows, painting us in jewels. When Daniel slid the simple gold band onto my finger, his hands were steady. He looked into my eyes and promised before God to love and cherish me in sickness and in health for the rest of his days. I believed him. I believed every single word. The bliss was intoxicating. We drove away from the reception with tin cans clattering behind our car, my head on his shoulder, a future as bright and shiny as my new ring stretching out before us. We were starting our honeymoon with a road trip down the coast, a week of charming inns, scenic overlooks, and finally being truly together. The first few days were a dream. We were clumsy and shy, and everything I'd imagined my first time would be sweet and sacred. We drove with the windows down, singing along to the radio, stopping at every kitschy roadside attraction we saw. On day 3, we pulled over at a viewpoint overlooking the ocean. The cliffs dropped dramatically into the churning blue water below, and the wind whipped my hair across my face. Daniel grabbed his phone. "Stay right there," he commanded, a wide grin on his face. "You look beautiful." He snapped a few pictures, the sound of the digital shutter lost in the roar of the waves. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated happiness. I was a wife. His wife. "Oh, let me see," I said, running over and wrapping my arms around his waist. He handed me the phone without a second thought. I was smiling in the picture, my eyes squinting against the sun, the ocean, a perfect backdrop. He'd captured the moment perfectly. He'd captured times me, times perfectly. I was about to tell him so when the screen lit up with a notification banner at the top. An unsaved number. The text was short. Asterisk. Thinking about last night. Can't wait for you to be home. Asterisk. My blood went cold. My smile froze on my face. It was probably just spam. A wrong number. It had to be. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked. He was leaning against the guardrail, looking out at the water, his back to me. "Yeah, fine." I managed to choke out my voice thin. "Just admiring your photography skills." He chuckled, oblivious. My thumb hovered over the message app icon. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Asterisk. "Don't do it, Angela. Trust your husband. Don't be that wife." Asterisk. But I couldn't stop myself. My thumb tapped the green icon. The text was at the top of a long, long thread. I tapped on it. The contact was just a string of numbers, no name. My eyes scanned the last few messages, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. My breath hitched. "Her times. Have the best time with your wife. Just remember who was keeping your bed warm the night before." Asterisk. "Him times. Always. You know you're the one." Asterisk. "Her times. Prove it when you get back." Asterisk. There were pictures. Explicit pictures. Things I'd never even considered doing, let alone with someone I wasn't married to. Pictures of her. Pictures of him. Pictures of them together. I started scrolling up, a desperate, sick feeling churning in my stomach. I scrolled past yesterday. Past our wedding day. Past the week before. The month before. The conversations went back and back and back. 9 months, the entire time I had known him. He was sleeping with her when he asked me to be his girlfriend. He was sleeping with her when he told me he loved me. He was sleeping with her the day he bought my engagement ring. He was sleeping with her the night before he stood at the altar and promised to forsake all others. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. I felt the bile rise in my throat. Every chaste kiss, every prayer we'd said together, every promise of purity, it was all a lie. A sick, elaborate performance. I wasn't his respected, cherished bride. I was his gullible religious cover story. I scrolled and scrolled a spectator to my own destruction until I saw it. A text from Daniel sent from our rehearsal dinner while I was in the bathroom. Asterisk. Wish you were here instead. Can't wait to see you tonight. Asterisk. I stopped breathing. He left the dinner early. He told me he was feeling overwhelmed and needed to get a good night's sleep before the big day. I'd kissed his forehead and told him I understood. I'd felt a rush of love for my sensitive, thoughtful fiancé. He hadn't gone home to sleep. He'd gone to her. The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I looked up from the screen, my vision blurry with tears I hadn't realized were falling. The world tilted on its axis, the beautiful ocean view turning into a nauseating, spinning vortex. I heard the crunch of gravel behind me. Ready to head to the hotel, baby, Daniel's voice was cheerful light. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. I'm starving. I just stood there, paralyzed, his phone gripped tight in my hand, its screen a glowing testament to the ruins of my entire life. His arms felt like a cage. My body went rigid. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the sickening warmth of his hands on the skin of my arms. He was touching me, kissing my hair, while the proof of his monstrous betrayal was burning a hole in my hand. I twisted out of his embrace, stumbling back a step. I held up the phone. The screen was still lit up, a neon sign broadcasting my ruin. His smile vanished. Angela, what? Don't, I whispered. The word came out like broken glass. I shoved the phone at his chest and turned walking blindly toward the car. The drive to the hotel was 20 minutes of suffocating silence. He kept opening his mouth to speak, then closing it. I stared out the passenger window, watching the postcard-perfect scenery blur into a smear of green and blue. Every tree, every crashing wave felt like a personal insult. How dare the world be beautiful when mine had just ended? The hotel room was disgustingly romantic. A 4-poster bed strewn with rose petals, a bottle of cheap champagne chilling in a bucket, a honeymoon suite. I wanted to set it on fire. Daniel closed the door behind us, the click of the lock echoing in the room. Baby, you have to let me explain. Explain what I spun to face him, my voice finally finding its volume. Explain the 9 months of text, the pictures. Or should we start with the night before our wedding? Explain how you left our rehearsal dinner to go sleep with her. The color drained from his face. He looked like I'd physically struck him. Good. It's not what it looks like, he stammered, the classic pathetic defense of a guilty man. It looks like you're a liar, I spat. It looks like you stood in a church in front of God and my family and made a mockery of me. Of everything I believe in. All that talk about purity, honoring God, was that all just a performance? Was I just the religious idiot you could trick into playing the part of your wife? He sank onto the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. I was going to end it, I swear. After we got married, it was going to be over. Oh, how noble of you, I laughed a harsh, ugly sound. You were going to grant me the honor of being your only woman times after times you'd already sealed the deal. After I was legally and spiritually trapped. It's not like that. I love you. No, you don't, I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. You don't love me. You love the idea of me. The good Christian girl who would give you the perfect-looking life while you did whatever you wanted on the side. I walked over to him, my whole body trembling with a rage I didn't know I was capable of. Get your phone. He looked up, confused. What? Get your phone, I repeated through clenched teeth. You were going to end it. Fine. End it. Right now. In front of me. He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't over. It was never going to be over. Do it, I commanded. With shaking hands, he pulled the phone from his pocket. He unlocked it and opened the message thread. I stood over his shoulder watching. His thumbs hovered over the keyboard. Tell her it's over, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Tell her you're married and you can't ever see her again. He typed deleted and typed again. Finally, he wrote times. I can't do this anymore. I'm married. Asterisk. He hit send. We both watched the screen waiting. The 3 little dots appeared almost immediately. My stomach churned. Her reply was instantaneous. Asterisk. What the hell are you talking about, married? You were with me 2 nights ago. Asterisk. There it was. The final confirmation. The other nail in the coffin of my 9-month fairy tale. She was just as blindsided as I was. He hadn't just lied to me, he had lied to everyone. I backed away from him, a cold, hollow feeling spreading through my chest. Divorce. The word screamed in my head. A scarlet letter in the world I came from. A public failure. A sin. Asterisk. What God has joined together, let no one separate. Asterisk. The verse was branded on my soul. Daniel saw the conflict on my face. He saw his opening. We can fix this, Angie, he said, his voice turning soft and pleading. He stood up, trying to take my hands. I snatched them away. We made a covenant. Before God. For better or for worse. This is the worst. We just have to work through it. God hates divorce. He used my own faith as a weapon, twisting the blade. And I stranded 1,000 miles from home, humiliated and utterly broken, let him. I had no friends here. No family. No money of my own. All I had were my vows. And they felt like a life sentence. That was the end of our honeymoon and the beginning of our marriage. The next 4 years were a masterclass in misery. The charming, God-fearing man I'd fallen for was gone, replaced by a sullen, cruel stranger. He never hit me, but his words left bruises no one could see. I was stupid. I was needy. I was no fun. I was lucky he'd even bothered to stay with me after I'd violated his privacy and ruined our honeymoon. He held that over my head like a guillotine. I withered. I lost weight. I stopped talking to my family much because I couldn't bear to lie anymore, and I was too ashamed to tell the truth. Grace Chapel became a place of judgment where I felt every eye on my hollow cheeks and joyless smile. The change happened slowly. I started visiting a different church on the other side of town, a little community church with a woman pastor and a killer coffee hour. I didn't talk to anyone for months, just sat in the back. But then a woman named Sarah invited me to her book club. I went. And for the first time in years, I talked to people who didn't know Daniel, who didn't see me as half of a broken whole. They just saw me. They made me laugh. They reminded me what friendship felt like. With their support, a little bit of my spine grew back. It started with small things. Daniel came home one night and sneered at the dinner I'd made. "Is this all there is?" he asked, poking at a piece of chicken. The old me would have apologized and offered to make something else. The new me looked him dead in the eye. "If you don't like it, feel free to make your own dinner." He was so stunned he didn't speak for the rest of the evening. It felt like a superpower. I started saying no to things I didn't want to do. I started making plans with my friends from the new church without asking his permission. He hated it. The docile, controllable wife he'd curated was disappearing, and he didn't know how to handle it. A man like Daniel can't stand a woman he can't control. One Tuesday afternoon, I came home from having coffee with Sarah to find a suitcase by the door. "I can't do this anymore," he said, not looking at me. "You're not the woman I married." "You're right," I said, a wave of profound, earth-shattering relief washing over me. "I'm not." He left. Just like that. 3 months later, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a picture posted by one of his cousins. It was Daniel on one knee, proposing to a woman with a perfectly round pregnant belly. The caption read, "Times?" She said yes. "Can't wait to welcome another member to the family?" Asterisk. I looked at the picture. I looked at the happy, smiling couple about to start their family on a foundation of lies, just like we had. But instead of the gut-wrenching pain I expected, I felt nothing. Just a quiet click as the last lock on my cage sprang open. His divorce lawyer called mine the next day to expedite the proceedings. Today I have my own small apartment, a job I love, and friends who feel more like family than my actual family ever did. I'm working on myself. I'm healing. And sometimes late at night I think about that girl standing on the cliff, her whole world crumbling. I wish I could tell her that the worst day of her life was actually the first day of her freedom. Daniel thought leaving me was his final act of punishment. He had no idea it was the greatest gift he ever could have given me. I have never ever been happier.
Story Teen.
23 years. We got married at 17 high school, sweethearts who actually made it. Or so I thought. We built a life, a home, raised 2 kids who are now mostly grown and out of the house. We were supposed to be heading into the good years, the easy years. Instead, I was living with a stranger. It started subtly. Girls' night became a weekly thing, then twice a week. Initially, I was all for it. Go have fun, you deserve it. But then the nights got later. She'd roll in at 2 a.m. smelling of wine and someone else's perfume, full of stories about Jen's horrible date or Sarah's new promotion. I'd pretend to be asleep listening to her stumble around in the dark, the rhythm of our life suddenly off-key. Then came the nights she didn't come home at all. The first time I panicked. I called her phone a dozen times. Straight to voicemail. I called Jen, who sounded groggy and confused. "Mandy, no, I haven't seen her." We were supposed to get drinks, but she canceled. An hour later, Mandy texted me. Asterisk. "Sorry, babe, phone died. Crashed at Sarah's, didn't want to wake you. See you in the morning, XO asterisk." My gut twisted. Sarah was single, lived in a downtown condo, and collected men like they were Funko Pops. I didn't like her. But I swallowed the knot in my throat. I didn't want to be the jealous, controlling husband. So I texted back a simple, "Okay, love you." This became the new pattern. Late nights with the girls. Last-minute sleepovers at Sarah's. She was a ghost in our house, a ghost in our bed. The distance between us grew until it felt like a physical presence, a cold wall of glass I couldn't break through. The breaking point, the moment my denial finally shattered, came on a Tuesday. A miserable, rainy October Tuesday. Her alarm went off at 3:00 a.m. Not my alarm, hers. I jolted awake, my heart pounding in the pitch-black room. "What's going on?" I mumbled. "Just getting up," she said, her voice oddly bright. She was already out of bed, heading for the bathroom. I propped myself up on my elbows, confused. "Your shift isn't until 8. "I know," she called out over the sound of the shower starting. "Sarah and Jen and I are going for a walk before work. Getting our steps in." I lay back down, staring at the ceiling. A walk. At 3 a.m. The wind was howling outside, and a steady, miserable rain was lashing against the window. I could hear it, a constant drumming that said, "Times stay in bed, asterisk." But she was in the bathroom blow-drying her hair. Then I could smell her hairspray, then her perfume. She came back into the bedroom, fully dressed in nice jeans, a sweater, and her good waterproof jacket. Her makeup was done. Full foundation mascara, the works. "You're awfully dressed up for a walk in the rain," I said, keeping my voice flat. She didn't miss a beat. "You know, Sarah. We always grab coffee after. Gotta look presentable." She leaned down, gave me a quick cold peck on the cheek, and grabbed her purse. "Don't wait up." The phrase hung in the air long after the front door clicked shut. Asterisk. Don't wait up. Asterisk. It was 3:30 inches the morning. I couldn't sleep. I just lay there, the gears in my head grinding, trying to make the pieces fit. They wouldn't. The story was absurd. 3 women in their 40s getting up in the middle of the night to go for a walk in a storm dressed for a brunch date? It was a lie. A clumsy, insulting lie. But what was the truth? I must have finally drifted off because I woke up to my own alarm at 6. The house was empty and silent, save for the rain. The space next to me in the bed was cold. I went through the motions: shower, coffee, toast, all while a cold dread solidified in my stomach. I needed to haul some old junk to the dump that day, and my sedan wasn't going to cut it. I needed her truck. Her keys were still on the hook by the door, right where she always left them. I grabbed them, figuring I'd just call and let her know. I could swing by her work and drop them off later. I walked outside into the gray, wet morning and saw my sedan parked in its usual spot. But her big, expensive F-150, her pride and joy, wasn't there. The space where she always parked it was empty. My blood went cold. She'd left before 3:30 a.m. She said she was going for a walk. But she took her truck? I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over her name. My heart was a drum against my ribs. I pressed the call button. It rang twice, then she picked up her voice, breathless and high-pitched. "Hey, everything. Okay," she chirped. "Yeah, fine," I said, my voice like gravel. "Listen, I need to borrow your truck to run to the dump. I'm just going to grab your keys and..." "Oh." The sound was sharp, panicked. "You can't." "I have it." I stared at the empty space in the driveway. The rain dripped from the eaves of the house. "You have it. Where?" "On my walk," she said a little too loud. We drove to the trailhead at the park to start from there." The park. The park was less than a mile from our house. You could walk to the trailhead in 10 minutes. My mind was racing, connecting dots I hadn't wanted to see. "You drove your truck," I said slowly, "to go on a walk?" "In the pouring rain." "Yeah." "It's great, so refreshing," she insisted. I could hear something in the background. Not wind. Not rain. It sounded like a TV. A low murmur of voices from a morning news show. My whole body went numb. I knew. In that single sickening moment, I knew everything. The lie was so clear, so transparent, it was like she wasn't even trying anymore. "Okay," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Okay, Mandy." "Great, I gotta go. The girls are waiting." "Love you," she chirped, and the line went dead. I stood in the driveway, the rain soaking into my hair, my shirt. I looked at her keys in my hand. Then I looked at the empty spot where her truck was supposed to be. She didn't take her keys. She had a second set, a set I didn't know about. I walked back inside the cold dread in my stomach, now a solid block of ice. I sat at the kitchen table, her keys clutched in my fist, and I watched the clock on the stove. 7:15 a.m. She'd be home soon to shower and change for her 8 a.m. shift. She'd walk in thinking I'd bought a ridiculous story, that I was the same clueless, trusting husband I'd always been. But he was gone. He'd died somewhere between the 3 a.m. alarm and the phantom truck. A new man was sitting at this table. A man who had been played for a fool for the last time. The only question left was what I was going to do about it. And as I heard the garage door begin to rumble open, I knew she was about to find out. The garage door whirred shut, and a moment later the door to the kitchen opened. Mandy walked in, shaking rain from her jacket. She was smiling, a practiced bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Morning, babe, you're up early," she said, kicking off her boots. I didn't move from my chair. I just watched her. The keys were in my hand, and I let them clink against the wooden table. Her eyes flickered to the sound, and her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "You left your keys," I said. My voice was flat. "Empty." "Oh, silly me," she laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Must have grabbed my spare set by mistake." "The spare set I didn't know you had," I said. It wasn't a question. She stopped her jacket halfway off. "What's this about, Luke?" "Let me see your phone, Mandy." Her face hardened. The fake brightness vanished, replaced by a defensive glare. "Why? So you can go through my things like some kind of paranoid freak. Just show me the phone." "No," she snapped. "Not until you show me yours. It's only fair." It was a pathetic attempt at deflection, a classic cheater's gambit. "Fine." I unlocked my phone and slid it across the table. "Knock yourself out. You've got the password. Nothing's changed." She stared at it, her bluff called. She didn't pick it up. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape she couldn't find. "Your turn," I said, holding out my hand. Her jaw tightened. Reluctantly, she pulled her phone from her purse and handed it to me. I unlocked it. I knew her password too. I went straight to her texts. The conversation at the top was with Sarah. Below that, Jen? Below that, our daughter. I scrolled and scrolled. Nothing. The entire thread with him, whoever he was, had been wiped. A clean, deliberate deletion. She watched me, a smug little smirk playing on her lips. "Find what you were looking for, detective." I ignored her. I went to her recent calls. There was a number there dialed last night and again this morning. No name attached. I memorized it. Then I set her phone down and picked up my own. I pulled up the browser, logged into our phone provider's website, and navigated to the account usage page. I'd done it an hour ago, but I wanted her to see. I selected her line. I clicked on text message details. A log appeared on the screen, a list of every number she had texted in the last 30 days. I turned the phone around so she could see the screen. I pointed to the number from her recent calls. "Who's this?" She squinted at it. "I don't know. A coworker, probably." "A coworker you texted 926 times this month," I said, my voice dangerously low. "A coworker you were texting at 3:15 this morning while you were supposedly on a walk in the park, a walk you took your truck on." The color drained from her face. She looked from my phone screen to my eyes, and for the first time she looked terrified. She saw the man who had been gone for months. The man she was married to. The man she'd just broken. "Luke, it's not what you think," she stammered. "Then what is it, Mandy?" I demanded, my voice finally cracking with the weight of it all. "Tell me the truth. Just for once, tell me the goddamn truth." She just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. No words came out. The lies had run out. And in her silence, I got my answer. It was a roar that filled the entire house. I stood up, the chair scraped loudly against the floor. "I'm done." I walked past her, up the stairs to our bedroom. I pulled my old duffel bag from the top of the closet and started pulling clothes from my drawers, stuffing them in without folding. T-shirts, jeans, socks. I didn't cry. I didn't feel rage. I felt nothing. A vast, hollow emptiness where 23 years of my life used to be. She followed me into the room. "What are you doing, Luke? Don't do this. We can talk about this." I zipped the bag and slung it over my shoulder. I walked to my nightstand and picked up my wallet and my keys. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a complete stranger. "There's nothing to talk about," I said. And I walked out. The first few days were a blur of cheap motel rooms and rage. But the rage burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. The pain was still there, a physical ache in my chest, but I shoved it into a box. It was fuel now. I called the best divorce lawyer in the city. I sat in his plush office and laid out the whole pathetic story. He listened patiently, then looked at the financial statements I'd brought. "She can't afford that house on her salary," he said, tapping a pen on the mortgage statement. "Or the truck. You've been carrying the load for a decade. You're in a much stronger position than you think." He gave me a script. File first. Demand the house be sold and the equity split. Offer her a fair buyout for her half, but set a firm deadline. No negotiations. No emotional appeals. The pick-me dance, the pathetic pleading of a betrayed spouse begging their partner to choose them. I rejected it completely. When Mandy's texts started flooding in times, "I miss you," I made a terrible mistake. "Please, let's work this out," times, I replied with a single brutal sentence my lawyer had drafted. Asterisk. Please direct all future communication regarding the divorce proceedings to my attorney. Asterisk. I gray-rocked her into oblivion. I blocked her on social media. I communicated only through email and only about the kids. The woman I had loved for more than half my life ceased to exist. In her place was an opponent in a legal negotiation. 2 weeks later, I moved into a small, clean, 2-bedroom apartment. The first night, surrounded by boxes, the silence was deafening. But by the third night, it sounded like peace. I bought a new coffee maker. I bought sheets that weren't part of a matching set she'd picked out. I started to build a life that was just mine. My kids, both in their late teens, handled it better than I expected. They weren't blind. They saw her late nights, her distance. They were angry at her, but they rallied around me. We started having weekly dinners at my new place, ordering pizza and talking more than we had in years. I started saying yes to things. A weekend fishing trip with my brother. A concert with an old college buddy. I even went on a few dates, awkward and strange at first, but it was a reminder that my life wasn't over. It was just different. I started planning a bucket list trip to see the national parks out west, something Mandy had always scoffed at as too rustic. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of genuine excitement for the future. Meanwhile, points began its slow, methodical work. The first domino to fall was the truck. Without my income covering the mortgage and utilities, she couldn't make the $800 monthly payment. I got a text from my son one day, "Time's mom's truck is gone." A tow truck just took it. Asterisk, she'd had to surrender it to the bank. Next was her job. Her affair partner was her direct supervisor. When I filed for divorce, citing adultery, the news spread through their office like wildfire. Their discreet relationship became a public spectacle. An HR investigation was launched. He was fired for violating company policy. 2 weeks later, she was let go for performance-related issues. No one wanted to work with her. The final blow was the house. She fought tooth and nail to keep it. She tried to get a new mortgage, but without a job and with a mountain of debt, no bank would touch her. The court-ordered deadline came and went. A for sale sign went up in the yard of the home where we'd raised our children. I drove by one last time the day before the closing. The lawn was overgrown, the flower beds choked with weeds. It looked sad and abandoned. I felt a pang of something not for her, but for the life that had died there. the ghost of the happy family we once were. But it was just a pang. It passed. I put the car in drive and pulled away without looking back. I had a map spread out on my passenger seat, a route plan through Utah and Arizona. My future was an open road. Hers was a house full of boxes and bad decisions. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt completely, blessedly free.
Story 12.
My phone buzzed on the counter, rattling against a stack of mail I'd been meaning to open for a week. I glanced at the screen. It was my brother Bill. Asterisk. Can you come over? Need your help with my hinge. Asterisk. I sighed and wiped my hands on my jeans. A request for hinge help from Bill was like a sailor asking for navigation tips from a guy who'd already sunk 3 ships. This wasn't his first dating app rodeo. It was more like his 5th anniversary of getting bucked off the same bull over and over again. For years, it had been the same story. Tinder, Bumble, OkCupid, now Hinge. Each app was met with initial baffling optimism, followed by months of bitter complaints. These girls are all so superficial, he'd grumble over the phone, usually while I could hear my mom setting a plate of food down in front of him. They only want guys with 6-packs who are 6 feet tall. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Bill had a very specific list of requirements for his theoretical partner. He'd recited it to me once dead serious over Christmas dinner. She had to be under 30, he just turned 30 himself. She had to be thin, fit was the word he used, but we all knew what he meant. She needed a real career, preferably something that cleared 6 figures, no kids. And she had to be okay with the fact that his main hobbies were collecting Funko Pops and reaching new levels in Time's World of Warcraft asterisk. The woman he described was a high-powered, child-free, 20-something fitness model. The man she'd be dating was my brother Bill, a 30-year-old Walmart greeter who lived in our parents' basement, weighed close to 300 pounds, and considered a trip to the comic book store an adventure. The math just didn't add up. I'm on my way, I texted back, grabbing my keys. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe he was finally ready to listen. Hope is a stubborn, stupid thing. 20 minutes later, I pulled into my parents' driveway. The house looked exactly the same as it did when I'd moved out 10 years ago. Same manicured lawn, same slightly faded welcome mat. Mom opened the door before I could even knock. "Francis, I'm so glad you're here," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like fabric softener and baked chicken. "Billy's in his room. He's been so frustrated lately, poor thing. It's not easy for a good man to find someone these days." I bit my tongue. "Yeah, Mom. The market's tough." She patted my arm, her face a mask of sincere concern. "Well, you always know what to say. Go on, work your magic." I walked down the hall, the carpet muffling my footsteps. I passed the living room, still pristine with its plastic-covered couches, and descended the stairs to the basement. Bill's room was really the entire finished lower level. A massive TV dominated one wall, surrounded by shelves overflowing with video games and action figures still in their boxes. A pile of laundry was heaped on an old armchair. The whole place smelled faintly of stale pizza and Axe body spray. Bill was sitting at his computer desk, scrolling intently on his phone. He didn't look up when I came in. "Hey," he grunted. "Hey." "You summoned me," I said, pulling up a rickety folding chair. "Yeah, look." He shoved his phone into my hand without making eye contact. "I'm getting 0 matches. I think my profile needs a woman's touch." I took the phone. The Hinge logo glowed at the top of the screen. I steeled myself and started to swipe through his profile. The first picture was a selfie taken in his car. The angle was from below, highlighting at least 3 chins. He was wearing wraparound gas station sunglasses, and the lighting was so bad he looked like a blurry cryptid. I swiped. The second picture was him with Mom at the Cheesecake Factory. Her arm was wrapped tightly around his shoulders, and she was beaming at the camera. Bill was giving a half-hearted thumbs up, a smear of what looked like whipped cream on his cheek. I swiped again. The third was a mirror selfie in the upstairs bathroom. The toilet seat was up in the background, and the counter was a disaster of toothpaste tubes, empty deodorant sticks, and a lone, sad-looking toothbrush. His expression was meant to be a smolder, but it came across as constipation. My heart sank. It was worse than I thought. Then I scrolled down to his bio and prompts. Asterisk, dating me is like times, finally finding a guy who will treat you right. Asterisk, my simple pleasures times video games, Marvel movies, and a girl with a good head on her shoulders. Asterisk, I'm looking for times, a partner in crime who takes care of herself. Gym rats, welcome. Must have a career and goals. No drama. It was a train wreck. A dumpster fire. A train wreck crashing into a dumpster fire. This wasn't a dating profile. It was a list of demands from a man who offered nothing on the list himself. He was fishing for a shark with a single Cheeto tied to a string. So he asked, finally looking at me. His face was full of genuine, hopeful expectation. What do you think? The picture's right. I told Mom that Cheesecake Factory 1 was bad. You think I should swap it out? I have one from Dave & Buster's, but my eyes are kind of closed. I looked from the phone in my hand to my brother's earnest, clueless face. He was waiting for me to suggest a better photo filter or a wittier bio line. He wanted me to rearrange the deck chairs on his Titanic of a dating life. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't lie to him anymore. I couldn't put a fresh coat of paint on a house with a rotten foundation. He saw the look on my face. His hopeful expression faltered. What is it that bad? I took a deep breath and slowly placed his phone face down on the desk between us, the soft click echoing in the quiet room. Bill, I said, my voice dangerously calm. This profile isn't the problem. His face crumpled. Not in anger, but in the theatrical, wounded way a child's face does right before a tantrum. What does that mean? He whispered, his bottom lip trembling. It means you don't need to overhaul your page, Bill. You need to overhaul your life. The words were out, and they hung in the stale, pizza-scented air between us. I couldn't take them back, and I didn't want to. You're looking for a woman who makes six figures, but you greet people for a living. You want a gym rat, but the heaviest thing you've lifted in the last year is a family-sized bag of Doritos. You want someone with their life together, but you're 30 years old and you live in your mom's basement. I leaned forward, my voice low but sharp. The woman you're describing, the woman on your ridiculous list, she would never ever swipe right on you, not in a million years. It's not the pictures. It's the product. For a second, there was dead silence. He just stared at me, his eyes wide, with a sort of horrified shock. Then the dam broke. You're so cruel, he sputtered, his face turning a blotchy red. Actual tears welled in his eyes and began to spill down his cheeks. I asked you for help. I asked for your help, and you're attacking me. He shot up from his chair, knocking it over with a clatter. You're just jealous. You've always been jealous of me because Mom loves me more. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and thundered up the stairs, his sobs echoing off the wood-paneled walls. I could hear his heavy footsteps stomp down the hall, followed by a muffled, wailing M.O.M. I just sat there, my heart hammering in my chest. I stared at the phone he'd left on the desk, its screen still glowing with his pathetic demands. A wave of nausea washed over me. Had I gone too far? I didn't have to wonder for long. Less than a minute later, I heard a different set of footsteps coming down the stairs. Faster, angrier. My mother appeared at the bottom of the staircase, her face a thundercloud of righteous fury. Francesca Marie, she said, her voice dangerously tight. I hadn't been called by my full name since I'd broken her favorite ceramic bird in the 3rd grade. What did you say to your brother? I told him the truth, I said, my own anger starting to simmer. Something you should have done 20 years ago. The truth? She scoffed, marching over to the desk. She completely ignored the overturned chair. He came to you because he was vulnerable. He was asking for help for your sisterly advice, and you tore him to shreds. He is up there crying his eyes out because of you. He's crying because a woman hasn't magically appeared who fits his laundry list of insane requirements, while he puts in zero effort to be a person worth dating. I stood up, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. You're not helping him, Mom. You're enabling him. You cook for him. You do his laundry. You let him live here for free. You've turned him into a helpless child. He is a good man with a good heart, she shrieked, her voice cracking. Life has been hard for him. It's not his fault. You have no idea how cruel the world is. And now his own sister is joining in on it. You should be ashamed of yourself. I'm not ashamed. You will go upstairs right now and you will apologize to your brother, she commanded, pointing a trembling finger toward the stairs. I stared at her furious, loving, hopelessly blind face. And I just shook my head. No. Her jaw dropped. No. No. I'm not apologizing for telling the truth. I'm done. I'm done pretending this is normal. A strange calm washed over me. While she stood there, sputtering, I saw his phone still lying on the desk. An idea, cold and sharp and petty, bloomed in my mind. A final edit. A woman's touch. Fine, she finally seethed. Then get out of my house, and don't you dare come back until you're ready to say you're sorry to him. Don't worry, I said, my voice flat. I walked toward the desk, and in one swift movement, I scooped up his phone. I just have to fix his profile first. Before she could react, I turned my back to her, and my fingers flew across the screen. I deleted every one of his self-aggrandizing, demanding prompts. I replaced them with a single brutal paragraph. Asterisk. My sister helped me with this bio. I'm 30. I live with my parents. I work at Walmart. My hobbies include video games and expecting a woman to be a supermodel with a PhD who is also inexplicably attracted to a man whose greatest accomplishment is his Funko Pop collection. My sister says I need to overhaul my life, but I think she's just cruel. Looking for someone to prove her wrong. No drama. Asterisk. I selected the worst picture of him, the triple chin car selfie, and made it his main photo. Then I tossed the phone back onto the desk. It clattered next to a half-empty can of Monster Energy. My mom stared at me, her mouth agape in pure, unadulterated horror. She didn't even have words. There, I said. Fixed. I walked past her and up the stairs, my head held high. I didn't look back. I got in my car and pulled out of the driveway, my phone already buzzing in the center console before I even reached the end of the street. I glanced down. A text from Mom, all in caps times. How could you do that to him? You are a monster. Asterisk. It was immediately followed by one from Bill. Times, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. Asterisk. I drove. My hands were shaking and a hot tear of anger and hurt finally escaped and rolled down my cheek. Was I a monster? Maybe. Maybe the truth was a monstrous thing. When I got home, I opened a bottle of wine. My phone continued to light up with a relentless stream of vitriol. Accusations. Insults. Demands. They were a tag team of indignation, a two-person army of weaponized victimhood. I read them all one by one. I let their words wash over me, the poison sinking in. Then with a deep breath, I opened my contacts. I found Bill's name. I pressed block this caller. A small, satisfying sense of quiet settled in my gut. Then I found Mom's. I hesitated for only a second before doing the same. The screen went dark. The house was silent. And in that quiet, I finally felt something other than frustration and anger. It was a strange, sharp, lonely kind of peace. I poured myself another glass of wine. The market was tough, Mom had said. She had no idea. Story 12. My older brother Tim was born with a gold medal around his neck. I was born with the instruction manual on how to polish it. Let me paint you a picture. I was 9 years old and had just won the regional soccer championship with a last-minute penalty kick. I came home with a ridiculously oversized trophy beaming my shins covered in bruises that felt like badges of honor. Tim, who was 12, had just gotten a B+ on a history paper. My trophy went on a bookshelf in the den. His paper went into a frame on the mantelpiece because he was applying himself at a critical age. That was the game, and I learned the rules early. Tim was the academic prodigy, the debate club champion, the future CEO. He collected accolades like other kids collected baseball cards. I was the jock, the one who was good with his hands, the son who would probably end up running a respectable, if not impressive, business. My parents loved me, I guess, but they times admired times Tim. There's a difference. He was their masterpiece. I was the comfortable, predictable sketch in the corner. For years, his brand of bullying was standard issue older brother stuff. Headlocks, stealing the remote, mocking my taste in music. Annoying, but survivable. It was our normal. Then when I was 18, I changed the rules of the game. I sat my parents down in the living room, heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird, and told them I was gay. It was awkward. My mom cried a little, asked if it was a phase, if she'd done something wrong. My dad just stared at the rug, looking like I'd just told him the stock market had evaporated. But they tried. They really did. They said they loved me no matter what. It wasn't the parade I'd hoped for, but it wasn't the damnation I'd feared. It was a start. Tim was a different story. He was home from his first year at university, already carrying himself with an insufferable air of intellectual superiority. He just looked at me, his face twisting into a mask of pure disgust. I walked out of the room. He didn't speak to me for a week. The first word he finally said to me was, "Faggot," spat under his breath as I walked past him in the hallway. That first year of university changed him. He fell in with some fringe ultra-conservative religious group on campus. Suddenly our house was filled with pamphlets about moral purity and biblical truth. He wasn't just the golden child anymore. He was a self-proclaimed soldier for God. And I was his personal demon to exorcise. Dinner became a minefield. "The wages of sin are death," Daniel he'd announce, staring directly at me while passing the mashed potatoes. "Not at the table, Tim," my dad would mumble, not looking up from his plate. "I'm just concerned for my brother's eternal soul, Dad." Someone has to be. My mom would just change the subject. "So Daniel, how is practice going?" Enablement is a quiet poison. It looks a lot like keeping the peace. He started leaving pamphlets on my pillow, highlighted with yellow marker. Passages about Sodom and Gomorrah. He'd stand outside my bedroom door at night, and I could hear him whispering, praying for my soul. It was psychological warfare dressed up in piety. The breaking point should have been when I brought my friend Mark home. We were just studying for midterms. Mark is also gay, but that's not the point. He's just a decent guy. We were in the kitchen making sandwiches when Tim came in. He took one look at Mark, then at me, and his eyes went cold. "Get your pervert friend out of this house," he said, his voice low and shaking with rage. I stood up. "His name is Mark. And you don't talk to him like that." "I don't want his sickness contaminating this family," Tim snarled, taking a step closer. He was bigger than me, broader. He'd started lifting weights with his campus crusade buddies. "Tim, stop it," I said, my fists clenching. My mom rushed in, drawn by the noise. She immediately put her hands on Tim's chest, not to restrain him, but to soothe him. "Tim, honey, calm down. Let's not make a scene." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Daniel, maybe it's best if your friend leaves for now." Mark was already grabbing his backpack, his face pale. "It's cool, man. I'll see you in class." He was out the door before I could say another word. I just stared at my mom. You're kicking him out because of times him asterisk. I'm just trying to keep the peace, she whispered, as if that explained everything. I spent that summer walking on eggshells, avoiding Tim and by extension my own home. I took extra shifts at my job, stayed late at the gym, spent weekends at friends' houses. The house had stopped feeling like a home and more like enemy territory where I was a prisoner of war. This past weekend was no different. I went on a camping trip with some friends from the soccer team. 2 days of fresh air, bad food, cooked over a fire, and zero talk of eternal damnation. It was bliss. I drove home Sunday evening feeling lighter than I had in months. I pulled into the driveway and saw my parents' car was gone. Good. A few hours of peace before the warden came home. I unlocked the front door, dropped my duffel bag in the entryway, and headed for the kitchen to grab a bottle of water. The house was dead quiet. Eerily so. A strange feeling crept over me as I walked up the stairs. A primal sense of wrongness. The door to my bedroom was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and my blood ran cold. Everything was gone. My bed was stripped bare, the mattress naked. The posters on my walls, bands, movie heroes, sports icons were ripped down, leaving little white scars on the blue paint. My closet door was wide open, revealing nothing but empty hangers swinging gently in the draft from the window. My bookshelf was barren, every single book vanished. My soccer jerseys, my cleats, my video games, my TV, my high school yearbooks, my clothes, all of it. Gone. The room was a hollowed-out shell, an echo of a life. The only thing left was my laptop sitting closed on the bare desk. My eyes scanned the floor, desperate. Then I saw it. In the corner where a small display case used to sit was a pile of shattered plastic and torn cardboard. It was my prized possession, a soccer ball from the 1999 Women's World Cup signed by the entire team. I'd met them at a clinic when I was a kid. It was my own personal trophy, the one thing that was undeniably mine. My dad had helped me get it appraised a few years ago for insurance. It was worth over $1,200. Now, it was a pile of garbage. The leather was slashed in multiple places, the signatures sliced through with what looked like a box cutter. I sank to my knees, the reality crashing down on me in a wave of cold, silent fury. He hadn't just thrown my things away. He had violated them, destroyed them, tried to erase me. As I knelt there amidst the wreckage of my life, I heard the crunch of tires in the driveway. A car door slammed. Then another. Laughter, my mother's. Footsteps on the porch. The jingle of keys in the front door. They were home. I stayed on the floor listening to their voices drift up the stairs. My mother's light laugh, my dad's tired murmur, Tim's self-important drone. They sounded so normal. So oblivious. I picked up a shard of the display case, its edge sharp against my palm. My mother's footsteps were the first to reach the top of the stairs. "Daniel, I didn't know you were home," she called out, her voice cheerful. She appeared in the doorway and froze. Her hand flew to her mouth, the color draining from her face. "Oh my God," she gasped. "Daniel, what happened? Did someone break in? Are you okay?" I didn't answer. I just looked past her down the hall as my father and Tim came into view, drawn by her cry. My dad's face slackened with shock. Tim, however, just smiled. A calm, beatific smile that made my skin crawl. "It wasn't a burglar, Mom," I said, my voice flat and dead. I got to my feet, the plastic shard still clutched in my hand. It was him. My mother looked from me to Tim, her expression a mess of confusion. "What, Tim? What is he talking about?" Tim stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back like a professor about to give a lecture. I did what had to be done. I cleansed this room of its worldly sinful attachments. It was an act of love. My dad finally found his voice. You. threw his things out. I liberated him, Tim corrected, his eyes shining with fervor. I removed the idols, the distractions that were leading his soul down a path of corruption. The violent video games, the profane music, the symbols of vanity and lust. He gestured around the empty room as if presenting a masterpiece. I let out a harsh, broken laugh. Vanity and lust? You mean my goddamn socks? My high school yearbooks? I pointed to the shattered remains of my collectible. Was a piece of sports history a symbol of lust, you psycho? It was an obsession, he shot back, his voice rising. You valued it more than your own salvation? That was worth $1,200, Tim, I screamed, finally losing the last thread of my control. The sound echoed in the empty space. Money is the root of all evil, he quoted serene. My mom turned on him, a rare flash of anger in her eyes. Tim, this has gone too far. His clothes, his books. They were just things. Mother, he said, his tone condescendingly gentle. Material possessions that chained him to his flawed ways. I am trying to save him. That's when I saw it. The flicker in my parents' eyes. The shock was wearing off and the old programming was kicking in. My mom was already softening, looking for a way to smooth this over. My dad was receding, his gaze drifting to the floor, preparing to check out of the conflict entirely. They were going to let him get away with it. They were going to ask times me times to be reasonable. To keep the peace. No, I said, the word cutting through the air. I looked directly at my parents, ignoring my brother. No more. You've been letting this happen for 3 years. You've watched him mock me, threaten me, and ambush my friends. You've chosen keeping the peace over protecting your son. Every single time. My mother started to cry. Daniel, that's not fair. Isn't it? I took a step toward them, feeling a strange calm settle over me. Here's the deal. You have one son in this house right now. You have to choose which one. Either he leaves, or I do. Right now. Don't be so dramatic, my father mumbled, unable to meet my eyes. Dramatic, I felt the plastic shard dig into my palm. He just destroyed thousands of dollars of my property to cure me of being gay. Your masterpiece just declared war on your sketch. So, you pick. Who are you keeping? The golden boy who thinks he's God, or the faggot who just lost everything? The silence was deafening. My mother sobbed, my father stared at his shoes, and Tim watched a smirk playing on his lips. He knew he'd already won. And in their silence, they made their choice. They always had. Okay, I said softly. I get it. I walked to the desk, picked up my laptop, and tucked it under my arm. It was the only thing I had left. I walked past my brother without a glance. I stopped in front of my parents. For the record, I said, my voice shaking, but clear, you didn't try. You just surrendered. I hope he's worth it. I walked down the stairs out the front door and didn't look back. I got in my car and drove straight to Mark's house. The next few weeks were a blur of crashing on a sofa, frantic apartment, hunting and fielding phone calls. My mother called every day, her voice thick with tears. Daniel, please just come home so we can talk this through, she pleaded during one call. Your father is a mess. You're tearing this family apart. The family was already torn, I said, leaning against the wall of the tiny studio apartment I'd just managed to rent. You just refused to see it. Is Tim still living there? A hesitant pause. Well, yes. This is his home, honey. Then there's nothing to talk about, I said. I will not set foot in that house as long as he is under its roof. That's the boundary. It's not negotiable. Then came the flying monkeys. My aunt called to tell me about the importance of filial piety and how I was causing my parents undue stress in their old age. my uncle left me a voicemail saying, "Whatever's going on, he's your brother and you need to be the bigger man and forgive him." They only got the sanitized version, of course. The story of the unfortunate disagreement. They didn't hear about the slashed soccer ball or the years of psychological torment. They just saw me as the aggressor, the one who abandoned his family. It was easier for them that way. I ignored them all and focused on rebuilding. I bought a cheap air mattress, a few plates from a thrift store, and started replacing my clothes piece by piece. My friends from the soccer team pitched in donating old furniture and helping me paint. For the first time, I was building a life that was entirely my own, free from the shadow of my brother's golden halo. I was broke and exhausted, but I was breathing freely. But one thing still gnawed at me. Justice. Forgiveness was off the table, but accountability was not. Tim had never faced a single real-world consequence for his actions. He lived in a bubble of parental protection and religious self-righteousness. It was time to pop it. I spent a weekend meticulously creating a spreadsheet. I researched the replacement cost of every single item he had thrown out, from my favorite pair of jeans to my textbooks. I found recent auction prices for similar signed memorabilia to put a value on the destroyed soccer ball. The total came to just over $4,000. Then I typed up a formal letter. It was a demand for payment for the willful destruction of private property. I cited the specific items, their values, and a final total of $4,150. I gave him 30 days to pay, after which I would be filing a claim in small claims court. I didn't add any emotion or anger. It was as cold and impersonal as a credit card bill. I printed it, put it in a crisp business envelope addressed to Mr. Timothy Miller, and sent it via certified mail to my parents' address. He would have to sign for it. They would all see it. A week later, my father called. It was the first time I'd heard from him since I left. "I got a letter," he said, his voice strained. "A legal letter. From you. To your brother." "It's a bill," I corrected him. "For the things he destroyed." "Daniel, for God's sake, this is a family matter. You don't sue your own brother." "He's not my brother anymore, Dad. He's just a guy who owes me $4,000. And if he doesn't pay, yes, I will take him to court. He's an adult. Let him face the consequences of his actions for once in his life. You never made him." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear my mother whispering frantically in the background. "We'll pay it," my dad said, finally the words sounding like they were being dragged out of him. "Don't take him to court. We'll give you the money." And there it was. The final predictable move. They would write a check. They would protect him, absorb the cost, and keep the peace. He would learn nothing. "No," I said, and the word felt powerful. "You don't get to buy him out of this. The bill is for him. The consequences are for him. I don't want your money. I want him to be held accountable. I'll see him in court." I hung up the phone before he could reply. Outside my window, the city lights were starting to flicker on. I was alone and I had a long fight ahead of me, but the air in my little apartment felt clean. It felt like my own.
Story 13.
The email sat open on my laptop, the subject line, "Practically glowing, your dream wedding at the Cove, contract and deposit information." My heart was doing a kick drum solo against my ribs. After 5 years of being engaged, of student loans and car payments, and saving for a house that felt perpetually out of reach, this one perfect, ridiculously expensive thing was finally ours. "Josh, look," I whispered, even though he was sitting right next to me on our worn-out sofa staring at the exact same screen. He wrapped an arm around my shoulder, pulling me in close. "We're really doing it, Jules. We're actually doing it. The Cove at Heron Point." It wasn't just a venue, it was a memory. We discovered it years ago on one of our regular treks. down to see Josh's younger brother James and his girlfriend Sally. They lived in this idyllic little beach town, a 10-hour drive that felt like migrating to a different planet. We'd make the trip 3-4 times a year, cramming our weekends with brunch spots. Sally wanted to try in dive bars. James swore had the best wings on the coast. They never came to visit us. Not once. But we told ourselves it was fine. They had the fun life, the beach life. We were the responsible older siblings. It was our job to make the effort. On one of those trips, we'd stumbled upon the Cove. It was an old manor house perched on a cliff, with sprawling green lawns that tumbled down to meet the churning blue of the ocean. A massive ancient oak tree stood sentinel at the edge of the property, its branches framing the horizon like a perfect photograph. We weren't even seriously planning back then, but we stood there holding hands and knew this was it. This was the place. For the last 5 months, planning had consumed us. Every spare dollar was allocated on a spreadsheet. Every spare moment was spent on Pinterest. And through it all, James and Sally had been our biggest cheerleaders. Or so I thought. Oh my God, Sally, you will not believe the photographer we found. I'd gushed to her on FaceTime a few weeks ago, my laptop balanced on a pillow. Her aesthetic is exactly what we were talking about, that kind of moody, candid vibe. Sally's face, framed by her perfectly beach-waved blonde hair, lit up on the screen. No way, send me her portfolio, I'm dying to see. I'm so happy for you guys. You deserve this. I'd screenshotted florists, caterers, even the string quartet we were considering for the ceremony. I sent her everything. I valued her opinion, and more than that, I wanted her to feel included. She was going to be my sister-in-law after all. Josh was the same with James. They were on the phone constantly. Dude, so we're locking in October 12th, Josh had said just last week, pacing our small living room. Can you believe it? The foliage should be incredible. You're still good to be my best man, right? I could hear James's faint but enthusiastic voice through the phone. Are you kidding me? Of course, man. Hey, since you're doing it down here, let me know if you need me to check anything out for you. Do a little recon. That's awesome, man. Thanks, Josh had said, beaming. It means a lot. See, supportive. Eager. Our family. Now, sitting on the couch, the official contract open, it all felt real. The total on the invoice made my stomach do a nervous flip, but we'd planned for it. We'd budgeted down to the last cent. We could do this. The deposit is due by 5 p.m. Tomorrow, Josh read aloud, tracing the words on the screen with his finger. 24 hours, Jules. In 24 hours, the Cove is officially ours. I leaned my head on his shoulder, a wave of pure, uncut happiness washing over me. All the waiting, all the sacrificing, it was all worth it for this. For that lawn, that oak tree, that view. We should call them, I said, already, reaching for my phone. Tell them the final date is set. We FaceTimed them together. They answered on the second ring, their faces tanned and smiling the blue sky of their beach town behind them. Big news, Sally asked, her eyes wide with faint excitement. The biggest, Josh said, grinning. We got the contract. We're officially getting married at the Cove on Saturday, October 12th. The deposit is due tomorrow. Oh my God, Sally squealed, clutching James's arm. That's amazing. It's finally happening. We're going to have the best time. A wedding in our own backyard. James nodded, a wide, easy smile on his face. That's unreal, bro. Seriously, congratulations. Let the countdown begin. We talked for another 10 minutes, going over little details, them asking about hotel blocks for the family and logistics for the rehearsal dinner. Sally even suggested a brunch spot for the morning after. Every word was a stitch, sewing them deeper into the fabric of our dream. Looking back, I can see the whole conversation was a lie, a masterclass in manipulation. But at that moment, I was just happy. My family was happy for me. Okay, we gotta go, I said finally. We're opening a bottle of champagne that's been in our fridge for way too long to celebrate. Do it, Sally said. You guys have earned it. Text me pictures. We hung up, and the tiny apartment was filled with the loud times, pop times of a cork. We didn't even have proper flutes, so we drank champagne out of coffee mugs laughing. It felt perfect. Later that night, curled up in bed, I sent Sally one last text. It was a picture I'd found on the venue's Instagram page, a bride and groom kissing under the big oak tree as the sun set over the ocean. I typed, "Times, can you believe this is going to be us in a year? I can't wait for you to stand up there with me." Asterisk. Her reply came back almost instantly. Asterisk. It's going to be the most beautiful wedding ever. I'm crying already, asterisk. The next morning, I woke up buzzing with an energy I hadn't felt in years. It was payment day. Josh had already made coffee and we sat at our small kitchen table, laptops open, ready to make the wire transfer that would seal the deal. This was the finish line of a marathon we'd been running for 5 years. Ready to do this, Josh asked, his finger hovering over the mouse. So ready, I breathed my own cursor position right next to the confirm transfer button on my screen. We looked at each other, sharing a silent, giddy moment of triumph. This was it. The point of no return. And then his phone rang, its cheerful ringtone slicing through the quiet anticipation. He glanced at the screen. "It's my dad," he said, answering with a smile. "Hey Dad, perfect timing. You're on speaker. Julie and I are about to..." He stopped. The smile on his face didn't just disappear. It was erased. He went utterly still, his eyes locked on mine. The color drained from his face, leaving a pale, sickly mask. He just listened, his knuckles turning white as he gripped his phone. "Josh," I whispered, my heart starting to pound for a whole new reason. "Josh, what is it? What's wrong?" He didn't answer. He just kept listening to the voice on the other end of the line, his expression crumbling. A deep primal sense of dread coiled in my stomach. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. Slowly, like he was moving underwater, he lowered the phone from his ear and pressed the button to end the call. He stared at the blank laptop screen in front of him, but I knew he wasn't seeing it. He looked completely and utterly broken. "Josh, you're scaring me," I said, my voice trembling. "Talk to me. What did your dad say?" He finally turned to look at me, and his eyes were hollowed out, filled with a disbelief so profound it stole my breath. "James and Sally," he said, his voice a dead, empty whisper. "They just booked the Cove." I stared at him, confused. "What? What are you talking about? For what?" Josh swallowed hard, his gaze unwavering. "For their wedding." He paused, and the final 2 words landed like a physical blow, knocking all the air from my lungs. "The weekend before ours?" The words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. For a second, my brain refused to process them. It was like trying to read a sentence in a language I didn't know. "That's not funny, Josh," I said, my voice flat. "Tell your dad to stop joking." "He's not joking, Jules." Josh's voice was hollow. Dad said James called him this morning, all excited. Said he and Sally wanted to surprise everyone. They put the deposit down an hour ago. For October 5th. At the Cove. I laughed. A sharp, ugly sound that held no humor. But they're not even engaged. Apparently he proposed last night, Josh mumbled, staring at the wall. Right after we got off FaceTime with them. The pieces clicked into place with sickening speed. The feigned excitement. Sally asking for my photographer's portfolio, my florist quotes, the name of the string quartet. James offering to do recon. Every supportive word, every encouraging question wasn't for us. It was for them. They weren't my cheerleaders. They were my spies. They had taken my dream, meticulously planned and paid for with 5 years of our sweat and sacrifice, and they had Xeroxed it. "They're stealing our wedding," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. The champagne from last night turned to acid in my stomach. I don't understand," Josh stammered, running a hand through his hair. "Why would they do this? Why the same place? Why the weekend right before?" My shock was hardening into a cold, sharp-edged rage. "Don't you see? It's not a coincidence. It's a power play." I stood up, pacing our tiny kitchen. The Cove is 10 hours away, Josh. It's a destination for our entire family. Your grandparents, my parents, our friends from college. They can't make that trip 2 weekends in a row. They can't afford 2 flights, 2 hotel stays, 2 wedding gifts. James and Sally know that. They're forcing everyone to choose. And they knew who would be chosen. The younger son. The one who lived in the fun town. The first wedding. Ours would be the sloppy seconds, the encore that half the audience had already left for. This is a slap in the face, I said, my voice rising. They wanted our wedding, but they wanted it first. They let me do all the work, all the planning, and then they swooped in and took it. Josh grabbed his phone. I'm calling him. There has to be an explanation. He put it on speaker. My eyes were glued to the screen as the phone rang. And rang. And rang. It went to James's chirpy, pre-recorded voicemail. Hey, you've reached James. Leave a message. Josh hung up, his jaw tight. Okay. Try Sally. I dialed her number, my thumb trembling. It rang twice and then went straight to voicemail. She hadn't just ignored the call, she'd actively rejected it. She sent me to voicemail, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Josh's face was a storm of confusion and fury. He opened his messaging app and typed his thumbs flying across the screen. Asterisk, James, call me right now. Dad told us about the venue. What the hell is going on, asterisk? We both stared at the phone. The bubble under his text switched from delivered to read. And then, nothing. No reply. No call. Just a gaping, intentional silence that screamed their guilt louder than any confession could. They were ghosting us. The last bit of hope I'd been clinging to, that this was all some colossal, idiotic misunderstanding, evaporated. This was malicious. This was planned. They had smiled in our faces while stabbing us in the back. The next few hours were a blur of numb disbelief. We didn't make the wire transfer. The 5 p.m. deadline came and went. Our dream venue slipping through our fingers while its contract sat open on my laptop like a tombstone. Later that evening, Josh's mom called. Her voice was laced with a forced, placating cheerfulness. Josh, honey, I spoke to James, she said. Josh had her on speaker, his face grim. He and Sally are just so excited they got a little carried away. You know how spontaneous they are. They said they just assumed you'd be thrilled to share the experience with them like a big month-long family celebration. I snorted. A big celebration where my guests would be broke and exhausted before my wedding even started. Mom, they booked the exact same venue a week before us, after we spent 5 months telling them every single detail. Josh said, his voice strained. And now they won't answer our calls. That's not spontaneous. That's insane. Now, let's not use that kind of language, she chided gently. I'm sure they didn't realize how it would look. Sally was worried you'd be upset, which is probably why they're not answering. They're just scared of the confrontation. Why don't you just find another weekend? Maybe in the spring. The Cove is lovely in the spring, I'm sure. I saw red. She wasn't defending them. She was making excuses for them. She was asking us, the ones who had been betrayed, to be the ones to compromise. To roll over and accept it. To move times our times wedding, the one we had planned for years. Josh hung up, looking defeated. He sank onto the couch next to me and buried his face in his hands. I don't know what to do, Jules. I stared at the picture I'd texted Sally less than 24 hours ago. The bride and groom under the ancient oak tree. It felt like a lifetime ago. The image was tainted, now poisoned by their deception. I couldn't imagine standing on that lawn under that tree knowing they had just done the exact same thing 7 days earlier with half my family missing because they'd already been there. I know what I'm doing, I said, my voice firm and clear. The hurt was still there, a deep, brutal ache in my chest, but it was being eclipsed by a cold, hard certainty. Josh looked up at me. I'm not going, I stated. What, to our wedding? To theirs, I clarified. I will not stand by and watch them celebrate this. I will not smile for pictures. I will not buy them a gift. I will not toast to their happiness when they so deliberately and maliciously try to destroy ours. I am done with them, Josh. Completely and utterly done. He stared at me, his eyes wide. He knew I meant it. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a declaration. The line had been drawn. His brother and his future wife were on one side, and I was on the other. The family is already fractured. His parents are trying to sweep it under the rug to pretend this is just a silly sibling squabble. But it's not. It's a betrayal so profound that I can't see a way back. They didn't just steal a venue, they stole our joy. They proved that they value their own selfish whims more than they value us, more than they value family. And now I'm left sitting here in the rubble of my wedding plans wondering if I'm the crazy one. Am I overreacting? His mother's voice echoes in my head telling me to be the bigger person, to just move our date to forgive and forget. But I can't. Forgiving this feels like saying it was okay. And it wasn't. So I'm turning to the only place I can think of for an unbiased opinion. I'm laying it all out, every painful detail. Am I justified in boycotting my future brother-in-law's wedding after what they did? Or am I the one who's about to tear this family apart?